Driven towards center. Kelnick on his horse. Still going back. Warning track. Wall, it's gone. Nootbaar with a line drive homer. Driven deep to right. That one's going a long way if fair. It is on the roof of the chop house. Oh, baby, what a bomb by Burleson. It's a breaking ball, swing and a miss, and that is your ball game. The Cardinals play long ball in Atlanta.
It's what it sounded like on Bally Sports Midwest over the weekend as your St. Louis Cardinals lose that opener in this 3-game set against the Braves, but take 2 out of 3 overall. Played some pretty good baseball over the last couple of days, Alex, and mostly they relied on power. And T-Bone's been saying it for years on this show. Slug, baby, slug. That's got to be the mantra for a team that has a real chance to be able to win, not only getting to October, but through October. And the Cardinals showed you over the weekend what that formula can look like. Before we get to the good, can we get to the bad for a second?
What was the bad, man? I didn't see anything that happened that was bad.
As you watched that game on Saturday, the first game of this series, they lose 3-2 in extras. It felt like every Cardinals game you've watched all year long. It was close. It was a nail-biting experience, and you were just wondering, okay, how are they going to lose this one? Circle of trust here for a moment. The three of us, this is just us, right?
Turn the mics off. Turn them off.
Yeah, they're off.
As you watched that game, did any bad thoughts creep into your mind about the second half maybe not going as we all had hoped?
I mean, I like to live opportunistically.
Optimistic. One of these days, man, we're going to get this right.
He said opportunistic.
Hey,
The Cardinals could have been a lot more opportunistic there, but you were more optimistic. Happy Monday.
T-Bone had way too long of a weekend.
Because as I was watching that game, again, just 3 of us here talking, my immediate thought was, oh, bleep, they're the Marlins of last year. The team that relies heavily on a bullpen, good managerial decisions for the most part, really strong defense.
For the most part. Just a backhanded compliment.
Opportunistic offense. That was my immediate thought as I watched that game go down the way that it did on Saturday. There was that question of should he or shouldn't he pull Kyle Gibson at 100 pitches? Did you go to your best? Like, all of it to me felt like, oh boy, is this what the second half is going to be? Are the next 10 days before we get to the deadline going to be full of this nonsense? Thankfully, it was not, and the next 2 games went a lot better. But did those thoughts creep into your guys' mind as you were watching that on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, they crept into my mind after Saturday night's win, too, because despite those 3 runs that the Cardinals scored in the top of the 9th, we were talking about a 6-5 win, and Kyle Leahy was going to have to save the day for you, and then you got those insurance runs. But, yeah, I mean,
nice.
The Saturday afternoon one, it did feel like, oh, this is going to be the start of a very bad second half, and you're talking about offense not coming through in multiple situations. You're talking about not being able to get any extra runs late in the game. I was worried that you were going to lose 2 of 3 like I had originally predicted on Friday and thinking this is going to be an awful second half. So it absolutely crept into my mind, and then Saturday night got a little bit better. Sunday was a part where it was like, oh, okay. That was it. It was just, okay.
Okay. No, I thought there was
I thought there would be more there.
Yeah, like, oh, wow, we can slug.
Hey, I'm a simple man. I'm very opportunistic.
You know, me too.
Very opportunistic.
It's what keeps me going on weekends.
Yeah.
I did have a little bit of that thought process. Not so much that, like, they're the Miami Marlins, because, like, I never believed in the Miami Marlins.
They'll be the Marlins next year.
There's a lot of people nationally that do not believe in this Cardinals team, to be fair.
Stop listening to Jim Bowden, man.
When you're hitting Brendan Donovan cleanup, I can understand how you're getting to that conclusion.
Very true.
But I thought it was just a lot of what you saw early on, where it was, okay, Fernandez, he's been great all year, makes one, it was a bad pitch, but Rosario hits it, it barely scrapes over the wall. My first thought was, damn, that really sucks. Yeah. I didn't really think, okay, here we go in the second half. My thought process was, all right, they can still take 2 or 3. They got Sonny Gray tomorrow, and then they face some nobody that Atlanta's thrown in game 3.
Schwellenbacher.
Yeah. Unlike BK, I felt a little more optimism.
Opportunistic.
There you go.
Me too.
I was worried once we saw that Saturday game, the night game, the second of the doubleheader. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Unfortunately, Sonny Gray gave up like 100 home runs, a total distance of like 5 miles, but it's fine. Everything else was fine over the course of the weekend. I mean, you look back on that weekend, man, I think that the Cardinals are a better team than the Atlanta Braves. I know the Braves technically right now have a better record. I do not think it will finish that way. They're dealing with some serious injuries. At full strength, yeah, I'll take the Braves, but full strength doesn't exist for the Braves. Strider's not coming back. They're not getting Ronald Acuna Jr. back. They aren't going to have Ozzie Albies now for like 6 weeks, probably. They just signed Whit Merrifield earlier today. If that tells you any indication on where they're at currently, they could be aggressive at the deadline. It's possible. I wouldn't foresee them doing that, though. This is a team that doesn't right now have the same kind of minor league depth that it once did. And if I'm them, I'm not trying to go all in on this year. I want to save I'm holding out hope that 2025 looks a lot better than 2024 has. And so their long and short-term future looks better than a lot of teams across the National League. I would say, hey, it was the year from hell for us. We'll try to get this thing back on track in 2025, which means there remains an opening for the Cardinals. They just won the season series against the Atlanta Braves. You now have the tiebreaker over them. If you were to play them, for example, in the first round and you had the same record, it would be here in St. Louis. That is meaningful. That does matter. That was my biggest takeaway from the weekend. You saw two teams head-to-head that are right now right at the top of the National League wildcard standings, and I think you're the better team among the two.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Right now, you're the better team than them, and you proved it with the 2 series victories against the Atlanta Braves, and I thought this last one was convincing fashion. My bigger takeaway was the power for the Cardinals because, like I mentioned, Saturday afternoon in the doubleheader, I'm thinking this team's screwed. Still, offense is not showing up here. The pitching, we talked about how feels like it's going in the opposite direction. And if you've got no offense, you've got no chance, especially with all of these other teams coming through. And then you had the game Saturday night that showcased the power. But the one that was more important for me was Sunday afternoon. Sunday, where you had multiple solo shots from guys that I feel like it was important for the Cardinals to say, hey, these guys are not going to have a first half, or some of them are going to continue their first half, like Burleson, like Donovan, like Mason Wynn. You get Burleson with the home run. You get Nolan Arenado showing some offense. To me, when you got that power from the offense and when you found a way to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room in those victories, 4 runs in both of them, that is a selling point for me where you look at it and say, okay, pitching may go in the opposite direction, but it's still going to be good enough for you. Your bullpen is still great. If your offense shows that type of power, we're in good position to at least hold on to this wild card spot.
Yeah, I feel good about where they're at right now, despite me not feeling so good about where they were at like 2:30
really
on Saturday afternoon.
You should be more opportunistic.
This is what I love about the baseball season, man. We've talked about this a number of times. The best part about baseball is that if you don't like what you watched the night before, wait till the next day. And it's unlike any other sport in that regard. Nothing else in my sporting life gives me that kind of opportunity. Nothing. Can't do that with football. You don't like what you saw today? Well, dude, if it goes like that for like 2 more times, your team's done. It's over. If your team starts 0-3, 0-4, it is over for you. College football, your team starts 0-2, good luck. Enjoy the following season. Baseball, you don't like what you saw in a series, you struggle against, the Chicago White Sox or the Miami Marlins, wait till the next one. Decent chance that it'll get a little bit better if you trust your team. And I do right now, for better or worse, mostly trust the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't think people trust Ollie Marmol right now, though, Alex.
Why, man? What has he ever done to lose people's faith?
So there were a couple of decisions that people didn't really love in the game on Saturday. I thought it was interesting yesterday. He was on the Cardinals radio network discussing the decisions and said, the thing that people are criticizing me most for, I actually still would do it the same way. And that was pulling their starter, Kyle Gibson, after 6 2/3 innings. He had given up 3 hits, was really good in that game, guys. Really good. 100 pitches. And he decides to go to Ryan Fernandez in a big spot. They're up by, at the time, I believe it was 1 run, 2 runs, 1 run. Yeah, it was 2-0 at the time. So they end up, Eddie Rosario coming up to the plate. You've got Ryan Fernandez available for you, ready to go, coming off of this long extended break. They pull Kyle Gibson from the game. Alex, I had no issues with that. Ollie the next day said still would have done it the same way all over again. What I didn't like was the way that he played the rest of the game. Wish he would have pinch hit for Pedro Pajes. Wish he would have pinch run for Pedro Pajes in extra innings. So there were decisions that I think were legitimately fair to question from Ollie on Saturday in the extra innings game. I did not think the one that's been given the most criticism was one that I would have done any differently. I actually thought that was the right call. Gibson was at 100 pitches. You've got a guy in Rosario who had already seen him well earlier in the day. He took a walk against him, and Rosario doesn't take walks against anybody, really. And Fernandez is your dude. That's the guy I'm going to in that spot, in that scenario. So I thought it was the right call there.
Yeah, I'm done questioning Ollie when he's taking starters out of the games. Most situations, I may not like it, but it's very evident that he has a great relationship with these starting pitchers. And most of the time, it's the pitcher looking at him saying, like, this is the best time to get me out of here. And Ollie seems to have that communication going back and forth. So when you've got a lead and you've got a guy who was already at 100 pitches, I'm not going to try and push that anymore. The same that he's done with Sonny Gray. We may not like it when Sonny wants to come out after 5 innings, but Ollie seems to know his pitchers well enough, and it's gotten the Cardinals to 50-plus wins already this season. So I've just gotten to the point now where I'm not going to question it anymore. He knows his starters, and that's how they win.
He did the same thing yesterday, and it worked.
I'm still going to
The
question
exact
Ollie.
same thing.
I don't even know if it's Ollie. I think it's the pitchers.
I think
it's the
Gibson would have
pitchers.
wanted to stay in there.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't think it was. I don't think it was Gibson
But
on
to be
Saturday.
clear, I don't have a problem with that one either because you're at that 100-pitch mark, you're at that threshold, and now the tying run is at the plate. I want to go to my best reliever that's not
Absolutely.
named Ryan Helsley. I love the way he managed that game. I love that he sent Gibson back out for that 7th inning.
Yep.
I love that he gave him a leash. He ends up using that leash by giving up the walker, the single, whatever it was, and then he goes, okay, it's now time for my high leverage arm. I love that. It just didn't work this time around.
You got 52 wins on
It's
the
worked
season.
for you most
Yeah.
of the season.
There's
the
a reason.
bullpen's been a big part of why you're winning these games. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work in one game. It was a really close game. Your offense is why you lost. You lost because you scored 2 runs in 10 innings and weren't able to put up the run in extra.
I was just going to say,
That's why you lost.
the real problem is the fact that you didn't give him enough wiggle room to go
100%.
out there and make a couple of mistakes.
He's Alex, that's T-Bone on BK. Coming up in about 30 minutes or so, we'll talk to Katie Wu, the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. But next, Erik Kratz. He's a former Major League catcher. He's a host on the Foul Territory podcast weekdays on YouTube. Want to talk to him about where the Cardinals are at right now and what would he add if he was in charge of the Cardinals at this year's deadline. We'll talk to Kratz next here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, you got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN, and we're always happy to be joined by Erik Kratz, the former Major League catcher. Now he's a host on Foul Territory. You can watch that weekdays at noon. Check him out on the podcast because they're on during our show, so check him out right after our show. You can see him on YouTube, Bally Sports Midwest as well. Erik Kratz, kind enough to join us here on BK and Ferrario. Erik, we always appreciate the time, man. How you doing today?
I'm freaking awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Thrilled to have you. So I do want to get kind of your big picture thoughts on the Cardinals before we dive in a little bit more on the micro. We get as you know, Erik, tied into what the day-to-day is. What's your national viewpoint on this team right now?
Man, how many World Series championships do the Cardinals have in their illustrious history of the franchise?
We got 11 here in St. Louis, sir.
Okay, so are Cardinals fans excited about the playoffs, or are they excited about the World Series?
Man, you've been listening to the show, huh? They don't care too much about the playoffs at this point.
You've heard from a lot of St. Louis fans, haven't you, Erik?
I haven't, but I played against St. Louis. I was in the division, out of the division, and I feel like those fans are clear. I mean, it's a moniker that everybody says they're the best fans. They're really, really good baseball fans because they've seen a lot of really good baseball. And because I think they have an expectation that I don't feel like the team was built to exceed the expectations. It feels like the team was built to suffice like a one-year playoff drought. And I feel like this is the week and a half. This is the week now that it's like if the Cardinals are going to do something, if the DeWitts are going to get into their pocket a little bit, this is the time to do it. We have all these heralded Cardinals prospects. Cash one in, cash two in, and get a frontline starter. And I love the guys. I love the rotation. I'm actually really, really liking this bullpen a lot, and I think the lineup is going to come around. But ultimately, if the lineup does come around, if the Goldies hit and the guys keep like doing what they're doing, I feel like guys are starting to climb to be this like really good lineup that they're supposed to be, even without Goldy right now. I think it's a playoff lineup, and a playoff rotation needs an absolute stopper. Has Sonny Gray been awesome? Absolutely. But wouldn't Sonny Gray be great if he's your number two? To me, get it done. Take the wild card, maybe catch the Brewers. Who cares? You're in the playoffs, and now you have a 1-2 punch of the elite guy and Sonny Gray. Now I'm excited about a combination of Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, those guys going in game 3 in long relief sometime. Now it's like, whoa, now I'm excited. But until then, I'm not that excited.
It sounds very similar to what we've been saying, Erik. That's exactly what we called for, like in the offseason. I liked their plan, generally speaking. I didn't know about Gibson plus Lynn at the time. Now seeing kind of how the plan has worked out, it makes a lot of sense. But I always felt like they were missing another guy to pair with Sonny, whether that was a game 1 or a game 2 starter, but somebody to be a frontline starter with him. I'm curious, when you think about that and you're thinking to yourself, okay, go make that move, are there names for you that come to mind that fit that criteria?
Jeez. Are Cardinals fans afraid of Max Scherzer? And people might be like, you know what? He's kind of washed up or whatever. He's shown what he's shown since he's come back from the IL. You watch our show. He was on. He talked about it. Like you have to trust. You have to trust veterans. When they're ready to go, they're ready to go. They're not coming. A guy like that, a Hall of Fame pitcher, is not coming back and being like, I'm going to kind of pitch half of what I can pitch. No, I'm coming back so I can dominate. Same as Kershaw. Kershaw is coming back for the Dodgers, and he's not coming back and being like, man, I hope this goes well. They can hang it up. Like, those guys are ready. And to me, I don't think the Cardinals want to make a move for Tarek Skubal, and I don't think the Tigers will actually let him go. But that is an elite arm, and I don't know that anybody but the Orioles have the cachet to get him. But to me, a Max Scherzer is probably going to have to figure out something financially because the Mets are paying most of his salary. The Rangers are like, well, you know, we want money too. So there might be something there that I don't understand. But to me, I feel like he may not slot in above Sonny, but, man, I would love to see the Cardinals, the trajectory they're going with a Max and a Sonny in the first two games of a playoff series in a wild card.
So, Erik, that's the name that we've brought up as well, but it kind of feels like I know how the Cardinals roll, and that's not the guy that they're going to acquire. If they go out there and get, I know, I feel the same way, Erik. If they go out there and get anybody other than Max Scherzer or Skubal or Garrett Crochet,
Evaldi, that feels Cardinals.
What does any other pitcher not named those big three guys do for you in the National League race?
Any other pitcher?
Yeah.
To me, then you have to start. Then you have to start going. And this is the one team that I think the Cardinals are so afraid of doing, because there's been so many Randy Arozarenas, Zach Gallens, and you go down the list of Adolis Garcias, and it's like these guys go away and they have success. But to me, if I were these two teams, here's what I'd do. I'd go Brian Wu from the Mariners, who is, when healthy, has been elite. He's a younger guy, so that's a very Cardinals thing to do, get a young pitcher for Jordan Walker straight up. And I would say who says no? Because Jordan Walker has an offensive upside that he hasn't seen in the big leagues with the Cardinals, whether it's because they've moved him around. It's not really my opinion. I don't think they've handled it real well, but he hasn't taken the job and sustained it. So to me, if that move happens, that makes, outside of those three guys that the Cardinals could get, Brian Wu, to me, and I'm not saying Brian Wu is available, I'm saying the Mariners have a dearth of pitching and they need a semblance of offense. And I think there would be kind of a fit where it would be, hey, you know what, you're going to come in and you're going to slot in and we're just going to give you a chance because we're hitting 210 as a team, so we need somebody to come in and do something. And I think he has the ability to hit. His power just hasn't come yet.
Erik Kratz is our guest here on 101 ESPN, former Major League catcher. Now you can see him on Foul Territory weekdays at noon on YouTube and on Bally Sports Midwest. Erik, I do want to ask you a little bit. One of the guys that we've kind of been tossing around over the last few days, I don't think it's going to happen, but Jack Flaherty is going to be one of the top arms on the market. Now, you saw everything that went down last year. I think some of the locker room stuff was a little bit overblown. I don't think he's a guy that players inside of the clubhouse had any issues with necessarily. I do wonder if he and the front office necessarily see eye to eye. But when you have a player like that was one of the top prospects in the system, had all of the history that he did here in St. Louis, what would it be like as somebody that's been inside of those clubhouses before? What would it be like if Mo said, you know what, we're going to bring him back because he's the best arm that we could get? What would that be like inside of the clubhouse, in your opinion?
I would hope, because I've never heard anything bad about Flaherty, or I wouldn't be saying this. I would hope the dudes in the clubhouse would get more than just the best pitcher available that they could get. The guys in that clubhouse came up with him or have connections with him in the sense that I remember watching him when I was still a prospect. I know it didn't work out here, but he can help me with this stuff, because the team has some relative youth to it, to its core. And people look at Nolan and Goldy as, wow, they're not youthful, and Gibby and Lance they're not youthful. But look, a lot of the guys, and it's that Cardinals environment, and Flaherty knows about all that stuff. I don't know if there's any kind of riff with Mo or anything like that. Flaherty's not afraid to speak his mind about other things, and so people automatically say, "Whoa, he's opinionated. He must have had some riffs." I'm opinionated, but you can still be loved by your teammates. And to me, I think that would, if there's no history there's nothing we can't bring him back. Then I think you would get him as this starting pitcher who the ball is coming out of his hand. It hasn't come out of his hand since I think he had a 3.4 ERA back when he was, a young Cardinal. The ball he is spinning it so well. That is awesome. But I think just that shot in the arm of a guy coming in that doesn't need to assimilate himself into the clubhouse. He just automatically fits back in, Coaches know him. The fans, there's comfort there. He knows where to go to eat. Like, all that stuff people overlook. To me, I think the Cardinals would get the most value out of somebody like that. If you follow what I'm saying,
Sure.
You trade a guy and he fails. It's like, oh, why did he fail? Was he not good? Was he tired? Was he injured? Did he not like the city? Can he, does his teammates? There's so many things, and I think the Cardinals check all those boxes because of the familiarity, and I think that's a really, really great call. But he's not going to be free either, and that's my fear with this front office is complacency at a cost.
Hey, Erik, from a catcher's perspective, what's it like acquiring a starting pitcher at a trade deadline and as a catcher getting to know that pitcher in a short amount of time so you can kind of implement him into the rotation on the same mindset down the stretch?
Well, based on my career, I was the one shifting teams, so I was always looking at new pitchers. So getting one new pitcher at a trade deadline was like easy peasy for me.
Rather than five.
Rather than a whole new staff of 13 that I had to learn because I was in AAA with another organization and then get called up to the big leagues and thrust right into a situation. The biggest thing is guys that can assimilate themselves to a new team are guys that are confident in what they do. So as a catcher, if you get a pitcher who's like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to follow you, whatever you say, we're good to go. That is scary to me sometimes because I'm like, well, what do you like to do? But then if they take it a step further and they're like, hey, I'm going to follow you because I have confidence in whatever you put down because you know the hitters and I know myself and let's get after it. Then I'm like, okay, this is good. Like that makes it so easy. When, I didn't play in the PitchCom era, but there's plenty of ways to a pitcher, can call his own game. But I never saw a guy get traded over who was like, I'm going to call my own game. You just put down their strengths, how they'll best succeed against the hitter's weaknesses. And really, you're not trading for, a AAA depth piece. You're trading for the Jack Flahertys, the Max Scherzers, the Tarek Skubals, and it's like I can watch a few videos and see what they do pretty well.
All right, Erik, we'll get you out of here on this. The Cardinals do have a young catcher in Ivan Herrera who has been a good hitter and was a good hitter in the minors. He was the reason why the Cardinals decided to non-tender Andrew Kisner in the offseason, a guy that they liked as a backup catcher. But Pedro Bajes has been excellent behind the plate this year, and Ivan Herrera allowed 41 of the 44 would-be Steelers to reach successfully. It's not what you want. And they say it's because of a lack of arm strength. They say they can strengthen his arm, but it's more of an offseason thing, and hopefully he'll get better behind the plate in terms of throwing runners out. You have history with the position, obviously. How difficult is that to improve over time?
Arm strength, I don't, and this might be ignorant of me to say, I don't think it's hard to improve. I think it takes a lot of dedication, and I think it takes a lot of consistency in how you're doing it, but you have an opportunity to improve your arm strength by just the same way as a pitcher has the opportunity to improve it. Long toss, your work, your mechanics of it. And I think, to me, it's harder to improve arm strength than to improve accuracy. But when you're only throwing out 3 of 44 attempted steals, that's a liability. And I think the Cardinals, they used to do a great job of holding runners as a organization. Pitchers that got called up, you wouldn't get called up if you were over a 1-3 to the plate. Now, granted, had Yadier Molina behind a dish, and I think some of his thrown out, caught stealing percentage was a little elevated because of the fact that the organization was strict on their pitchers. You would not get called up unless you could throw 2 pitches for strikes with a third pitch working and you were below a 1-3. And so if you have that on the adverse side with Herrera not being able to throw anybody out, you're sitting there and going, This is a huge disadvantage because it's like saying, well, we're going to have him behind a dish, and anytime somebody gets on, you're giving up another single. Or every single's a double, every walk's a double, and you're sitting there like, oof, now I can't let anybody on. And this pitching staff, especially the starters, they'll strike a lot of guys out. So that's a huge detriment. But to increase your arm strength, I mean, we live in a land of velocity now. So if a catcher can improve his arm strength by doing all the clown stuff that all the pitchers do, running as hard as they can and throwing it into a net and, heavy balls and like throwing balls backwards, all this stuff that they do, to me, I don't think you put the effort in. So I think it's something that he can do. And with his offensive ability, hey, I think there's a ton of value there.
I'm going to be curious to see if he's a guy potentially that we hear his name started to float around at the deadline. But if not, I definitely think that is something that they'll be implementing in the offseason. Hey, Erik, appreciate the time, man. Always great to be able to catch up. Hopefully the Cardinals do something that you were suggesting, and we'll talk with you again soon, my man.
I love it. I appreciate you guys having me on. And no, I haven't listened to your show. So if we're in cahoots, that is crazy.
It is, but great minds, right? Appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely.
You got it. That's Erik Kratz. Appreciate him joining us as always. Former Major League catcher. Now you can catch him on Foul Territory weekdays at noon on YouTube and Valley Sports Midwest. They do a really good job over there on that show. I like that he has that 10,000-foot view, Alex, of what are the Cardinals? What should they be? And he is very much in line with Cardinals fans. Like, I am on an island over here. I am alone in believing that getting to the playoffs has value, even for this organization at this point in their trajectory, right? I do agree with him, though. Like, if you want to be a little bit more in a year where the National League feels a little more open to me than maybe it did coming into the season. I don't think the Braves are what we thought they were. I don't think the Dodgers are what we thought they were because of what their pitching staff is at right now, their situation. The Phillies are the one team that you look at and say, man, that is a behemoth. And they're going to be really tough for anybody to beat. But in a 3 or 5, 7-game series, it can happen. But it probably requires them to go out and make a big move for a pitcher or two.
And I mean, I do fall in line with what Erik just mentioned there. Like, I don't. As much as it would be great to get to the postseason, I've seen that already prior to last year a couple of times of getting to the postseason and falling short. I want to see that next step, and I think that next step is going all in. Now, I know he mentioned like Scherzer, Skubal, and Crochet, and that's it. I think you can expand it a little bit more, but I like
Eovaldi in that range. I think we've seen Eovaldi do it enough at this point that he's got to be like somebody that you can count on as a number 2, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm with you there because I think he's a gamer in the postseason, and I do believe that's important. I'm starting to like Eric Fedde a little bit more also, but I'm with him in the sense of you've got all these guys, and it does feel like if Atlanta's going to be struggling, if Philly is the mighty one you got to find a way to take down, then that one's just going to be all cross your fingers and hope something good happens. But get to that point against Phillies. Don't just sit there and say, we'll see what happens in the postseason. So I'm with him. Now, I don't know if I'm going Jordan Walker for Brian Wu all in, but I would go all in and start investing and bringing in something of worth meaning rather than bringing in Tyler Anderson and saying, well, let's see what happens.
If the Mariners are, and this is a big if they want to talk about their young starting pitching, I'll talk. I'm just not talking about Jordan Walker, which means that they're probably not going to talk with you.
Give me Logan Gilbert.
Sure, and they're not going to do that. He's Alex S. T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up in 15 minutes, questions and answers. NFL Quick Hitters is next here on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent Tracy Bibb. After all the flooding over those last couple of days last week, it's now you're getting to the point where you're on the other side of it. But man, you probably had so many problems if you didn't have the right insurance agent because of that flooding. I know personally my sister had these issues where their basement flooded. They couldn't get a hold of anybody. They were trying to figure it out themselves. And then they found out that their insurance coverage didn't take care of flooding issues. And it goes beyond flooding, whether it's a tree falls on your roof or you get hail damage or maybe you just get into a fender bender. You need to make sure you've got the right insurance agent that's taking care of you. And that's Tracy Bibb, her and her team at Allstate, always looking for competitive rates, making sure that they're saving you money and you are getting the personal attention from your insurance agent when something happens. It's not a matter of if it's a matter of when something goes wrong. Give Tracy a call today. Tell her you heard me talk about it on 101 ESPN, and she will take it from there. A free non-committal quote. 314-328-4260. 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Tara Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals beat the Braves yesterday 6-2 as they take 2 of 3 from Atlanta, and they start a 3-game set at the Pittsburgh Pirates tonight. 5:40 will be first pitch. Mitch Keller will be on the mound for Pittsburgh. Andre Palante will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Along with Alex and T-Bone on BK, let's dive in some very quick NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN. Let's start out with this. Jordan Love, biggest story in the NFL today. He is at Packers training camp. He will not be participating in Packers training camp.
Diva!
But please do not call this a holdout because it is very clearly not a holdout. That is according to the team, which essentially means, say, we ain't going to fine you. Just let's take some time. We'll hammer out this contract.
The NFL is so weird, man.
It's absurd.
I'm going to find some guys, but like, hey, you're not going to get fined.
Yeah, well,
you're
he's
just
there.
Okay. Just
and
not participating in practice.
Side.
Somebody just did this recently, too, and it's like, what? Imagine being that guy's teammate. Man, I'm out here.
I know.
It's 100 freaking degrees.
Sweating in these pads.
At
least Chris Jones just didn't show up.
Yeah, like seriously, if you're not gonna hold out, just don't be there watching me.
I just got a helmet into my abdomen, and this guy's on the sideline throwing some balls and not getting fined.
Good hit. Good
So
hit.
the Packers GM came out today and said to reporters, yeah, Jordan Love not going to be doing anything, but that's because we're getting this contract done. The expectation is that they're getting close, and they believe that this will not take too much time. Alex, there was also a report from our guy, Pretty Ricky, on Twitter.
Yeah, Pretty Ricky.
He's the people's champ, and if you're not familiar, he's a guy that just has a bunch of different reports. I don't know how or why he gets them, but he seems to be able to get them out there before
I think it's
a lot
really
of
the
NFL
rapper.
reporters do. He said that there's going to be a new highest-paid quarterback in the NFL later on this week. If he connects the two, it sure seems like that is very likely going to be Jordan Love. Alex, how would you feel if the Packers later on this week announced that there was a contract extension with Love, and it is for more money than any quarterback in the history of the league?
By the way, how many the highest paid quarterbacks have we had this offseason?
This would be the third, right?
Yeah, Lawrence, and who was the other one? I don't remember who the other one was.
Burrow?
Burrow
He's got done. Was his last year?
Didn't Goff get it done?
His was not the highest paid, though, I don't believe.
So I think we've had one.
So one? Okay. I feel like we do that every other week as the highest paid quarterback. I mean, I don't like it because it's 1 year for a dude that had a great year, and now you're going to make him the highest paid quarterback in the
Goff
NFL?
was the oh, no, he wasn't. Sorry.
He wasn't?
Burrow was last year.
But I get it. Green Bay's got to do it. Green Bay, you and I were talking about this in the office before. You did this to yourself, Green Bay. And if he doesn't work out, and let's say last year was a fluke, and he comes back down to earth and he's just average, you did that to yourself, making him a backup quarterback and limiting those first couple of years where he was cost controlled.
But you had to. You had Aaron Rodgers.
I get it. But if he becomes average, you did this to yourself by putting yourself in this position. But as we're seeing with the Dallas Cowboys and the Dak Prescott, you've got to do this. And I'd rather do it with a 25-year-old quarterback than a guy like Dak.
Yeah, your option is do it now and it's $55 million, or do it next year and it's $60 million. And so, you do it now. You get it done. The earliest that you can get a contract finished, that's when you should do it. They also have one more year on this current contract, so they do have another year of quote-unquote cost control on him. But they're going to be basing this on the franchise tag, which means he's getting $50+ million per year no matter what. And if he's getting it from you or he's getting it elsewhere, he's going to get that somewhere. Dak's going to get it from somewhere. Tua's probably going to get it from somewhere. So when you pay your quarterback, it is time to pay the piper. I think it's smart. I think that Jordan Love is really, really good. And is he as good as, Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or Lamar or Patrick Mahomes? Probably not. Is he the next tier of quarterback, though? Would I put him in that category with Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts? I would. And that's the way that he's probably going to be paid. $55+ million per year. It's smart. The Packers have to get this done, and I believe they will get it done ultimately, probably at some point within the next week. Guys, there was one other thing that I wanted to get to for some NFL quick hitters. The Athletic did an interesting piece, I thought, on who the San Francisco 49ers could trade Brandon Ayuk for if they decided to do a player-for-player deal. Because right now, I don't see any scenario in which San Fran decides, oh, yeah, we'll trade Brandon Ayuk to the Raiders or to
for a second-round pick.
Yeah, for a first or a second-round pick.
Like the Chiefs did with Tyreek.
At least they did that before the draft, right? Like, you get something for that season when you no longer have Tyreek Hill. The 49ers would be trading for a pick next year, and they could get that same pick if they traded him, next year. You get the entire season of Brandon Ayuk and still get that pick next offseason. So I don't see them going that route. But maybe they could go player for Brandon Ayuk. Couple of the potential players that they had in here. Malcolm Kuntz was a defensive end from the Raiders. They had Kuntz in a third-round pick for Ayuk. That was one option. Joey Bosa and a fourth-round pick for Ayuk was another one that they threw out there. Matthew Judon of the New England Patriots and a second-round pick for Brandon Ayuk. That's an interesting one as well from the Patriots. And then one other, Terry McLaurin for Brandon Ayuk straight up was another one that they threw out there. Would you guys be interested in any of those if you were the 49ers?
The Terry one, I think, would be the only one I'd be interested in. Because
you wouldn't do Joey Bosa?
No, because my offense,
the Bosa brothers together again?
My offense still... it lacks without Brandon Ayuk. And you get Debo and you have Christian McCaffrey, but I still need that other weapon with Brock Purdy to make sure that I'm lethal offensively. Like defensively, I thought they were fine last year, and you just need that offensive push. So if I'm going to trade Brandon Ayuk, I'm going to get another wide receiver back that can help my offense.
I think I would do the Bosa one because I want to be a lead off both edges. You've got Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa on this, both Bosa brothers on the side going at the edge there. And I think when you look at how do you beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you got to get pressure in Mahomes' face. And I know, that's only if they meet them in the Super Bowl. I'm not really worried about the NFC if I trade Ayuk. I think you can get through the NFC. And no matter what, how do you stop the best quarterbacks? You get in their face, you get in their face quickly, and it allows you to do different things to where you don't have to send more men, you don't have to go zero blitz all the time. You can kind of play some more coverages, double team. I love the idea of being able to have two guys that can get to the quarterback, whether that is a defensive tackle like the Rams did it with Donald and Von Miller, or two edge guys in the Bosa brothers.
I wouldn't do any of these. Wouldn't do any of them. I think Terry McLaurin is a downgrade, although I do like Terry McLaurin. I would just pay Brandon Ayuk after the season. I would say, Brandon Ayuk, you're going to be on a one-year deal this year, and then next year you can either be on the franchise tag or you can be on a long-term extension, and we'll figure that out when we get there. But in the meantime, I'm not doing a player-for-player trade. I'm not doing a player-for-pick trade. I'm not doing any trade. There are no trades for Brandon Ayuk that I would consider within realistic outcomes. If you wanted to trade, Lamar Jackson for him, sure, yeah, we'll take Lamar. You guys can have Purdy and Brandon Ayuk. We'll take Lamar off of your hands. That'd be great. I don't think there's any scenario that makes a whole lot of sense from the 49ers perspective. They're too good of a team. They've got too high of aspirations this season.
Maybe the Texans will trade C.J. Stroud for him.
Maybe.
Be a smart move.
I would do that. Jordan Love.
Load up on wide receivers.
He's Alex's T-Bone on BK. Questions and Answers is next.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Classic Air Care. Have been making people comfortable since 1926 when it comes to your HVAC system. Maybe it's old and you're trying to get as much life out of it as possible, or maybe you need to get into the market now of purchasing one. Nobody likes going through the purchasing process of getting an HVAC system. Here's why I would tell you to call Classic Air Care, because what I love about their process is they'll send a technician out if you're in the market for the HVAC system. And what the technician does is he walks through the entire house, he looks at your HVAC system, and he finds out what you have that can work with the new unit and what you're going to need for the new one. Basically, you're not going into it where they walk into your house and say, yep, you need a new one. Here's what you should buy. You're getting the honest and the knowledge from the technicians at Classic Air Care when they walk through your house. Plus, they've got financing options available to you. And don't just believe me. Check out the hundreds of reviews that are up on their Google Reviews page talking about the customer service, the knowledgeable technicians, the timeliness that you get with Classic Air Care. That's what you want in your HVAC company, and that is Classic Air Care. Give them a call today. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you, or check them out online, Classic Air Care or classicaircare.com.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. Katie Wu joins us in less than 10 minutes here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start out with this from the 314. Guys, do you agree that Alec Burleson would be the MVP of the Cardinals if the season were to end today?
Ooh. Yeah. For me, I think it would be tied between he and Mason Wynn.
Interesting.
And I think I would give the slight edge to Alec Burleson because of the power.
Yeah, I think I would go Burley because he's provided the power that they weren't getting from either Goldy, Arenado, or any of the other left-handed bats. So I would say it's Burleson for me. I'd have Wynn probably third behind Helsley.
I'm changing my answer. Helsley's the MVP. The only reason you're at 52 wins is because of Ryan Helsley.
Have you guys now? I think it's Mason Wynn, personally, with what he's done defensively for you and offensively. By the way, have you looked at his wins above replacement number? It's not the end-all, be-all, but...
That doesn't matter, I've been told.
He's at 4 wins.
Who?
Mason Wynn.
What's Burley?
Not quite 2, 1.5. Now that takes into account defense.
Like
it's war. It's not good for anything.
I totally agree with you guys. I was just surprised to see that number. It's unbelievable. Have you guys looked at Wilson Contreras' offensive numbers?
Yeah.
He's only played 55 games, so he can't be in this conversation. You just missed too much time.
He's an MVP.
He is batting .280. His on-base percentage for the season is .400. He's getting on 40% of the time. He's got a .925 OPS in a season in which offensive production across Major League Baseball is so far down. This dude is crushing the baseball. He's got 11 home runs in 55 games. It's ridiculous what he's doing.
We were robbed of an MVP season because of his injury, because I truly believe he would be in the top 3.
He would have been on pace for like 30 to 35 home runs this year if he had played a full season.
With an incredible OPS, an incredible slug, and on-base percentage.
All right, from the 314, guys, if Torrey Krug misses the whole season and it's a successful year defensively, do you think that he would be bought out by the Blues next year?
No. I think he would, if he's healthy enough to play, I think they would look for a trade. And if he's not healthy enough to play, I think they just keep him on LTIR. The only way he is not in St. Louis by the end of his contract is if he's traded.
Yeah, and I just don't know if he's a tradable contract now.
That comes down to his health. Injury. It comes down to his health. Does he come back by the end of the season? The off season, does he able to start working out? Like, it all comes down to his health.
I'd be shocked if he's doesn't finish this contract as a St. Louis Blue, whether that's retirement because of injury, stays injured, plays through it. I just can't see them moving on from it.
Sorry, go ahead, BK.
I think you would have to attach too big of a pick to get rid of him via trade, and I don't think that they're going to buy him out.
The interesting part is if he does retire or retire unable to play, if they trade that contract to somebody who just needs the LTIR, like Arizona used to do.
But you'd have to give up a massive asset for
maybe.
that. We saw this offseason that a $3 million contract is worthy of a second to third round pick.
But what I mean,
have to give up a first round
pick. If a player's done, like if his career is done, sometimes you just got to give up a roster player or something like that.
I know, but I think that's changed. I don't know, man. Because it's $6.5 million of cash that you're having to give out every year, and owners don't want to do that unless they're getting a significant asset in return.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, from the 615, would you trade Donovan for Brian Wu? I would not. I'm not trading Donovan.
Brian Wu was good last year, but this year
he's been amazing.
Has he?
2.5 ERA. He's been great. He just hasn't pitched very much.
I think he's dealing with some kind of injury.
Strikeouts per 9 haven't been that. That's been less than what Kyle Gibson was.
What's he at right now?
I think like 6.
Yeah. I mean, that's surprising, but he's been very effective.
Yeah.
And last year he only pitched 89 innings. I'd be a little worried about innings limits.
I wouldn't trade Donovan for Brian Wu. I think Donovan is too critical for what the Cardinals want to do long term because he's clearly taken on a role as a leader in that clubhouse, and he can play truly everywhere. So, like, if they needed him to play second, like if they wanted to trade Gorman this offseason, they don't have to go find a second baseman. They can move Donovan to second, and they can fill out the outfield with other guys.
Coming up next, Katie Wu, Cardinals insider for The Athletic, joins us here on BK and Ferrario. Alex, NFL teams have reported for training camp, which means it's time to start looking at some futures bets this year, and the place to do so is over on the Circa Sports app in Illinois. If you want to take one of the AFC teams that could be a contender that's not named the Kansas City Chiefs, the place to do that is over on Circa. I'm looking at their odds, 16-1 on the Bills, 22-1 odds on the Jets, 10.5-1 odds over on the Ravens as well. Those are all better odds than what I could get if I went over to FanDuel, and that is something that Circa recommends. Check out other sports books. Check out the lines. They believe you're going to be coming back because you're going to win the most money possible when you bet with the Circa Sports app in Illinois.
I love that transparency, knowing and being confident that you are going to come back to them, whether it's those tight money line splits or those future bets that BK was talking about. Make sure you do them all on the Circa Sports Illinois app. Plus, the customer service is great. You're always speaking to a real person, not just some chatbot. Download the app today. It's the exclusive betting app for BK and Ferrario. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
All right, it's time to go out to the 101 ESPN hotline for our weekly Monday conversation with Katie Wu. She's the Cardinals insider for The Athletic. You can follow her on Twitter at KatieJWu. And if you do, you saw her piece from earlier today on the 3 things that the Cardinals need to do before the trade deadline, the 3 spots on their roster that could use some upgrades. Katie, appreciate the time as always. What are those 3 things in your opinion?
Well, shocker, pitching and offense. So, yeah, not exactly bold proclamations here, but I think when you're looking at what the Cardinals need to do at the deadline, yes, every contending team is looking to add maybe to the rotation, definitely to their bullpen, or find some offense off the bat, off the bench, which are the 3 areas I identified for St. Louis. But it's how they can do it that will make this realistic. I think, well, all 3 areas of the roster are different in terms of what they're asking for. The type of player the Cardinals are looking for this deadline it's relatively similar. They're not looking for any long-term, like, franchise-altering contracts, right? They're looking for rentals or players under 1 to 2 more years of remaining control that can get them through definitely the next 2 months, but maybe put them in a better spot heading into 2025. Contracts, how much money a player is owed, that's all going to play into it. So I think when you're looking at how the Cardinals can maybe improve their roster ahead of the July 30th deadline, which is creeping up, you're looking at 3 different areas, but you're more or less looking at the same style of contract.
Katie, do you believe it's a necessity for the team to get multiple pieces at the deadline, or do you think it's just one?
I think it depends, but I do think getting 2 of the 3, look, John Mozeliak getting 3 out of 3 is a really tough ask. It's a tough ask for anyone in anyone's front office, just given how undecided and unclear the market is shaping up. If it stays like this today, which it won't, but I'm not sure how it would get that much better, there are not a lot of options out there. So it's hard, I think, objectively speaking, to go out and demand that Mo gets 3 major league ready pieces to improve his roster. I think getting 2 out of 3 is what's important here. And for me, the most important thing the Cardinals need to get is another starter. But if they go out and they find a right-handed bat off the bench with a high leverage reliever, I think that's also okay. So it really just depends on what pieces they're able to get and who, of course, they're going to get if they decide to go those routes.
Katie, you mentioned in your piece names like Erik Fedde, Zach Eflin, Nathan Eovaldi. If that's the range that they're looking at, do you think that the Cardinals, in your opinion, if they acquired one of those types of pitchers, do you think they're a legitimate contender this year in the National League?
I do. And I know that while Nathan Eovaldi doesn't pack the same amount of excitement as a Garrett Crochet, There's reasons for why I think that would make the Cardinals a contending team. One, we know about the National League not exactly being the most competitive. And when I say the most competitive, you don't have to win a lot of games to be a contender in the National League this year. It's competitive in terms of how many teams are all bunched up together, which is why every win in the regular season counts from here on out, right? So if you go and you get a mid-rotation starter like a Nathan Eovaldi, like an Erik, who I still think would be a top choice for St. Louis, maybe even a John Gray if the Rangers decide to sell, you're putting assurance, right? You're putting more consistency into that rotation and giving your team a better shot to win every fifth day he's on the mound. You're also setting yourself up for what the team believes would be more success in the postseason, because we saw how quick those three-game series go in the postseason. If you have a 1-2 punch, and the Cardinals are confident that their 1-2 punch is like Sonny Gray and Kyle Gibson, and that's it, you put a lot of pressure on a game 3 if it gets that far. I think if you go and you have someone that you can put maybe in between Gibson or right after Gibson, like Eovaldi, like Fetty, like Gray, you're feeling a lot better about your chances in the postseason as well.
Katie, one decision that Ollie made over the weekend that kind of surprised us was Paul Goldschmidt being moved down to the 7th spot in the batting order. How big of a decision was that for Ollie Marmol?
It was big, and it's big because of how much Goldschmidt means to the organization. And I know fans sometimes get exasperated by that notion, but it really is true. Like, I know, crazy. Goldschmidt is such a respected presence in that clubhouse, and he does carry so much weight in terms of what he means to the organization. So when you send a message like that, when you move one of your star players down in the order, you're publicly admitting that this star player is more or less not performing. And, you know, we all have eyes, so we could see that in the first half, and Goldschmidt's acknowledged it. But this is a public declaration that, hey, what one of our best players and most respected players is doing right now is not good enough for the place that we had him in the lineup, so we have to move him down. And I want to credit Goldschmidt. He talked to us after the game yesterday, was very candid about, his thoughts on moving down. Ollie Marmol said it was a pro move. It could not have been handled any more professionally. Was it time? Yeah, I think so, especially with the at-bats that Burleson and Donovan and even Nolan Arenado are taking lately. They're looking a lot better. And, of course, literally no surprise, he homers in his first at-bat in that number 7 spot. But, I think it wasn't surprising for me. I think it was about time. And if this allows, if this temporary reset of the lineup allows Goldschmidt to find a swing and get more comfortable and find the Goldschmidt numbers that the Cardinals are hoping for, then is it really that big of a deal? I don't think so.
Katie, can this offense survive the rest of the season if they're 1 through 5 hitters in any order? Is Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, Wilson Contreras, Brendan Donovan, and Lars Nootbaar?
Yeah, I think so. And that's less of a mark against Arenado and Goldschmidt and more of a testament to what two bats in particular, Burleson and Donovan, have been doing. I mean, those guys have fueled the lineup, and you're talking about people that have stepped up. We talk about Burleson all the time, and rightfully so, because he has more or less been the face of the offense this year. But Brendan Donovan, I mean, his versatility defensively, we know. Offensively, turns out just as good. You can slot that guy anywhere in the lineup, and he takes really good at-bats, and I asked both him and Ollie about why he's able to be successful. Donovan, of course, no surprise, credits his teammates for putting him in a good spot to hit. And right, shocker. But Ollie Marmol said it was very clear it's his contact. He puts the ball in play. He takes really good at bats. He has a selective approach. It makes him successful no matter where he's in the lineup. So I do think so that they'd be successful with those 5. But I think Nolan Arenado looks refreshed after the All-Star break. I mean, his defense against Atlanta was spectacular. He's moving around better. He seems re-energized. I think he's close, and I know we've said that a lot, but this time he really does look different. That could also obviously be a major component for this lineup in the second half.
All right, Katie. Katie was our guest here on 101 ESPN, Cardinals insider for The Athletic. Last question for you. Can you name the player on the Cardinals, other than Michael Ciani, that's in the lineup every day that has the worst OPS on the team against left-handed pitching?
Ooh, trivia.
Oh, in the lineup every day, worst OPS against left-handed pitching.
Other than Ciani.
Other than Ciani.
He's in a different category.
Shots at Michael Sinise.
Poor Michael Sinise. Is it Goldschmidt?
It is Alec Burleson. The reason
Alec Burleson.
The reason why I bring this up, he is batting 195 against left-handed pitching with an OPS of 525 so far this year. He gets on base just 22% of the time. We have talked a lot about getting a right-handed bat that can help them, whether that's off of the bench, platooning a spot, whatever it might be. If the Cardinals were to go that route, the guys that have the worst OPS so far this season against lefties are Gorman, Newt, and Burleson in that order. How do you think they would implement that bat into the lineup, in your opinion? Because those are arguably also three of your most important players in the lineup on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think it depends, right? Because you're still not sure what Tommy Edman's going to look like. But if the lineups will look like today, if the lineup came out today, this is how I think they would do it. I think against right-handed pitching, you're starting Michael Ciani in center field every day. And if the opposing team goes to a left-handed reliever, then you put in maybe a Carlson, or you can switch Newbar to center field and you pinch hit for him. There's a way to do it where maybe you pinch hit for Burleson in case a lefty reliever comes in. What has plagued the Cardinals so far, and this is why they're second to last in production against left-handed pitching left on left, is that Ollie Marmol doesn't have a right-handed bat to use. There are definitely different ways that he can slot it in, and I don't think it's black and white. The versatility of the Cardinals when you're looking at players like Edman or, Burleson can play first base if he needs to. They can swing it around where it doesn't have to be like cut and dry. Here's how they'd sub it in. But I do think that they can figure out a way, especially when it comes to maybe when they play Ciani and when they don't, and making sure that right-handed bat actually is productive.
Katie, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy yourself this week as we have one more week prior to the Major League Baseball deadline. We'll talk with you again next week.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
Got it. That's Katie Wu joining us as she does each and every Monday here on BK and Ferrario. Appreciate her time as always. The reason why I bring that up, Alex, is because somebody on the text line said, guys, what do you do with Alec Burleson if you end up getting this right-handed bat? Do you consider keeping him in the lineup? So Katie brought up the idea of, okay, do you use that guy as lefty reliever comes into the game, you have a pinch hitter? That spot makes a lot of sense. Late in a game, big situation, whether it's Newt, Burleson, or Gorman, if you've got a right-handed bat that you really trust, you go to them in that spot. The tougher question, in my opinion, is what do you do if you go up against a left-handed starter in the postseason or down the stretch? You got a lefty starter on the mound, and let's say this production doesn't change for those three guys, Gorman, Newbar, or Burleson. It's really hard to say, I'm going to take Alec Burleson out of this lineup right now, and yet the production would suggest he is the guy that you should take out of the lineup right now against that left-handed bat. Like, let's say they get Mark Canha, right? You should start Canha at DH against that lefty starter, and then the moment that they bring in a right-handed pitcher, you go to Burleson again. And that may mean that they come back with another lefty coming out of the bullpen later on in that game, and you either have to pinch hit for him again or you just let him ride there. But that's probably the quote-unquote correct way to do it. But it's easier said than done because Burleson's been amazing this year. And it's hard to take that bat out of your lineup, even though the production would say you should.
Who strikes out more, Gorman or Burleson against lefties? I didn't understand the OPS, but if I'm looking just contact in itself, I feel like Gorman would be the bigger problem. Yeah,
it's a significantly bigger strikeout rate, but it's also a significantly higher production rate. His OPS is 100 points higher.
Yeah.
That's not insignificant. If it was like a 20-point difference, maybe you lean a little bit more towards the lack of a strikeout, but they're both basically batting 200, and one of them has a slugging percentage of 370, the other's 300.
Well, I think the real question, though, too, is, are you getting a significant upgrade over those guys? I know they're bad, but, and I don't know what Kevin Pillar's numbers are, but to me, Mark Canha makes sense. Tommy Pham makes sense. I don't know if Kevin Pillar makes a lot of sense for me to where I'm going to take Burleson or Gorman out of the lineup because I don't know how offensively improved you are if you take him out.
And that's why I brought up Mark Canha. Canha has a 900 OPS against left-handed pitching. So you're upgrading 300 points of OPS against lefties than what you would have had with Burleson in the lineup. And you can do it at DH, which makes it even easier because in this scenario, you've probably got Newbar and Donovan in the outfield and the corners, and I've got Burleson as my designated hitter / Mark Canha.
So it really comes down to who you're upgrading. But if you're getting a Mark Canha against lefties, he has to be in the lineup no matter what. And you just pick your poison of who you want to take out.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting... if they decide to go get that right-handed bat, that's probably the way they would have to go about it. And that's a difficult choice. And that's a difficult conversation to have. You've just talked to your all-everything first baseman to say, hey, we got to drop you down to 7th. Now you're going to talk to the guy that's arguably been your best hitter so far this year, and they did this a little bit with Albert, if you remember, where they said, hey, seeing the lefties for Burleson, or in that scenario, seeing the righties for Pujols helped him stay locked in against the left-handed pitching. So is that another conversation where Burleson will say, hey, if I don't get these everyday opportunities against the left-handed pitching, it will hurt my production against righties? That's something else you got to take into account. It's not as easy as just looking at the Excel sheet like I just did and saying, hey, the production isn't there. There's a lot more that goes into it, and I understand all that. All right, he's Alex, this is T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, The Athletic had a list of the top 50 potential trade targets at this year's deadline. How many of them were connected to the Cardinals? Do they all have something in common? We'll tell you about that next year on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so The Athletic put together a list of the potential fits for the Cardinals. We'll tell you about that here in just a minute. But before we get to that, Alex, you asked Katie a question about what the Cardinals need at this year's deadline. She wrote in The Athletic that they need three things: starting pitcher, right-handed hitter, and a right-handed pitcher coming out of the bullpen. I'm so surprised. We've been talking about all of those things for, 2 months now? Really, we've been talking about the starting pitching side of things since November 1st.
3 off seasons ago.
Yeah. But we all know kind of what they need. The question that you asked, though, I think is maybe a little bit more interesting. How many of those things do they have to acquire at the deadline for this to be considered a success? Out of those three things, a right-handed bat, a starting pitcher, and a right-handed leverage reliever, what would they need to do, in your opinion, for this to be considered a success, Alex?
Find a starting pitcher who is slated as a number 2 starter in a playoff series for you, and a high-leverage right-handed arm. When she said 2 of the 3, my thought process was, I'm not even considering the right-handed bat. That's extra to me. The most important factors for this Cardinals team is going out there and getting the starting pitching and going out there and getting that high-leverage arm. Because if you go get a right-handed bat, I think that's a great piece to have. And as we've seen and just talked about, it's good to have that so that you're not using these guys against left-handed pitchers that are really significantly struggling. But if you look at the National League, I don't know how many lefties you're really going to be going up against. And I don't think the offense is going to be impacted by a Tommy Pham or a Kevin Pillar or Mark Canha. It absolutely is going to be impacted if Kyle Gibson is starting game 2 and Miles Mikolas is starting game 3, and your bullpen is completely overused. And we're talking about Ryan Fernandez or Kyle Leahy or Mark Roycroft coming out of the bullpen in high leverage situations.
Chris, man.
You just call him Mike.
Dude, so no, I called him Mark. Here's the problem. There was a hockey player, Mark Roycroft, and every time I hear Roycroft, I'm thinking, damn, Mark Roycroft plays baseball? So I just did that in my own
you're
head.
Good, man. I
was on my rant, and I just blew it there, so that's going to screw things up. But those are the 2 necessities for me. 1, I'm happy. 2, I'm ecstatic, because that makes you one of the better teams in the National League.
Yeah, I think you've got 2 needs and a want. And I think the 2 needs are the starting pitching and the reliever, because you clearly need somebody that you can start in game 2 and feel at least comfortable and feel like you have a chance when you get to October. I think the reliever, as you saw over the weekend, is a necessity. I mean, in that doubleheader, when they burned Fernandez, and I think Kittredge was burned in game 1 as well, to bridge the gap to Ryan Helsley, they don't trust Gallegos. They went to Kyle Leahy, who's the 27th man who's enjoying the Memphis barbecue today. That tells me, sorry, Leahy and Roycroft, but you need another high-leverage right-handed arm that can slot into that bullpen. I do think that they should add a right-handed bat if they can find one, but it should be, hey, let's take care of the pitching side of things first, and then if we feel like we've still got some guys that we're willing to part within our minor league system, and there's somebody that's out there that matches up with us perfectly in terms of a right-handed bat, you add that. Because to your point on, is there anybody from the left side that really scares you? I mean, looking at the current playoff field, and look, the whole National League could change this thing around pretty quickly. There's maybe 2 lefties that I fear. One of them, Clayton Kershaw with the Dodgers. We'll see what he looks like when he starts on Thursday. Otherwise, they've got James Paxton. Not really worried about him. He's probably not even making their roster if they're healthy. Philadelphia, they got Ranger Suarez and Sanchez. Those guys are number 3s. If you guys can't hit a number 3, then we got bigger problems in the playoffs. And then there's nobody else. Mets, Braves, Fried's out. Maybe when Fried gets back, he's the best lefty that could be in the playoffs. There's just not a ton of lefties in the National League that really scare me from a starting standpoint.
I'd like to get a right-handed bat. I'm not going to lie. I think it would be good for them, and I think it would be that spot that's currently taken by Dylan Carlson on the roster. I don't think
it should be Herrera, but just me.
Fair enough.
I'm fine with Herrera and Tommy Edman.
I thought over the weekend there were a couple of spots where they could have pinch hit Ivan Herrera, and they've said publicly there's nothing more that he can learn by going down to AAA. They said that at the end of last season. That's why they decided to non-tender Kisner last year. So, yeah, I would rather see Herrera on the roster right now than Dylan Carlson. Notice that you saw 0 at-bats over the weekend for Dylan Carlson, best I can recall. So
he's resting up from the All-Star break, man.
I think that there's a spot on the roster for him, but whatever. I've already conceded that argument. They win. They decided not to do that. So if you're not going to do it with Herrera, I would like them to go ahead and upgrade that spot on the roster with somebody else. Their retort would probably be, well, that could be Tommy Edman. My retort would be, no, his spot is Brandon Crawford. Crawford is probably not going to be here long term, would be my guess. That's my assumption, speculation by me. But I think you can make it work where you have both Tommy Edman back on the roster and a right-handed hitter coming from the outside. So I'd like to get all three. I know that's me being greedy.
Pump the brakes over there.
I don't think that the guy we're talking about that's a right-handed hitter is going to cost you much. That's the reason why. Because you could go out and, like, these guys are a dime a dozen. Whether it's Mark Canha or even if it's Kevin Pillar, who I don't love, it wouldn't be my ideal roster acquisition. You could probably get him for, like, a super low-level lottery ticket type of a prospect. Like, what you got when you traded Matt Adams and you ended up getting, Juan Yepes, which worked out. Most of those guys don't. That's the kind of move that we're probably talking about. A guy that's probably 3 to 5 years away, and it's a lottery ticket. That's what you're giving up. I'd be fine with that, to get a right-handed hitter that can help you the rest of the way this season. I think a reliever is necessary. Like, that is no doubt about it. Got to happen. And then let's get to the starting pitching. We all agree they need to add a starter that can start a game 2 of a playoff series for this team. He needs to start ahead of Kyle Gibson, in my opinion. It's got to be somebody that you look at and say definitively, that dude is a better pitcher right now than Kyle Gibson at this point in his career. So this gets us to the Athletics list of the 50 most likely traded players at this year's deadline. Guys, they connected the Cardinals to 10 players on this list.
Oh, so everybody that's available.
Every single one of them is a starting pitcher. Basically, every starter that's available, not named Jack Flaherty, was connected to your St. Louis Cardinals. I'm going to read you this list real quickly. Scherzer, Eovaldi, Kikuchi, Fedde, Eflin, Bassett, Snell, Montes, Rogers, Trevor Rogers from the Marlins, and Tyler Anderson. I think we have talked about 7 of those 10 players, and the only ones that we haven't really are Snell, Montas, or Rogers. That's because Montas is in your division. Snell has been terrible or hurt all year. And Rogers, I just don't see them getting a controllable arm. So I don't know that those are necessarily the best options for the Cardinals.
I feel like we should play the game of Clue with those 10 guys. Like, maybe we should do this as a segment, because now I've got all 10 of those faces up on my board. Now, who of these guys are lefties? Now, close all of the right-handed pitchers. Now, who of these guys are great guys? Close all of the pads, and then that guy that's remaining, that's going to be the Cardinal that they acquire.
We're getting freaking
I put
Anderson.
together...
That's who I was thinking.
I'm curious where you guys fall on this. I put together my list in order of the 10 pitchers that I would be most interested in. Would you guys like me to go from 10 to 1 or 1 to 10?
Go 10 to 1.
Yeah, 10 to 1. Make us excited.
Number 10, Blake Snell.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if he's 10 for me. Yeah. I'd have Rogers as 10, but I get that he's...
Snell would be 10 because I don't trust the dude and he's hurt.
Number 9, Trevor Rogers. So I'm on the same line of thinking.
Trash versus trash.
I'm
in.
At 9.
Number 8, Tyler Anderson. And
Snell.
To me, that's my bottom tier. Like those 3 pitchers, I would just set them off to on Alex's clue board. I'm just going ahead and closing those
If
options.
those are the 3 that you're going to get, then I am not buying any stock in the Cardinals winning in the playoffs.
All right, 7 up. 7 for me, Zach Eflin. 6, Frankie Montas. I don't think he's going to be an option for you. I don't think the Reds are trading you within the division, but he would be my 6. I would rather have him than Eflin, but I don't view him as likely.
Those.
Number 5, Erik Fedde. Number 4, Yusei Kikuchi. And to me, 4 to 6, put Zach Eflin in kind of a category of his own. 4 to 6, Kikuchi, Fedde, and Montas are kind of in one category together. And now we get to the guys that I'm really interested in. 1 to 3. Number 3, Chris Bassett. Number 2, Max Scherzer. Number 1, Nathan Eovaldi. Given price, given age, given pedigree, given history of postseason success, given the current success, given the workhorse ability, the lack so far of any kind of meaningful injuries this season, my number 1 target based on who is likely to be available at this year's deadline is Nathan Eovaldi. That dude has been a number 1 for a staff that just won a World Series. He is a gamer. He has a strikeout rate that's perfectly fine. He gets a little bit of swing and miss, and he's really good at controlling contact the way that Chris Bassett is, but he's done it in a postseason where that dude can be a bulldog for me, and I trust him in a big game. I don't think you're going to do better, really, than Nathan Eovaldi this year at the trade deadline, as long as the Rangers decide to be a seller. To me, he makes all the sense in the world.
I think if I were to go 1 through 4, I would go Scherzer, Eovaldi, Bassett, Fedde. Those would be 1 through 4.
By the way, I think the game you were thinking of is Guess Who.
That's what I said. Did I say Clue? I meant Guess Who. Yeah, that's what I meant.
You're right. Go ahead. Keep
Same
going.
thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, it would be Scherzer, Eovaldi, Bassett, and then Erik Fedde. I understand the Eovaldi thing and the injury with Scherzer, but I think if you're going like best of the best, I'll go off of belief that Max Scherzer is going to do what Erik Kratz told us earlier in the show of, like, he's going to go out there and give you his best down the stretch. That and a Sonny Gray 1-2 punch would get me excited for the rest of the season. Nathan Eovaldi, I'm invested in once you get to the postseason. I love Chris Bassitt, and then Fetty's kind of that consolation prize. But those would be mine 1 through 4.
Yeah, I would go Eovaldi 1, just because kind of what BK said. He like profiles as like the typical 3 across baseball with swinging his stuff, but when he gets to October, I've seen him shove. Yep. And I think there's something to that. I believe in that, so I would have him 1 on my list. I would probably go Bassitt 2, Scherzer 3, just because I worry about some of the injury stuff with Max Scherzer. And then I think 4 for me would be Fetty. I think my boy Kikuchi would be 5 on this list. I would weigh some of those guys with some term on their deal as well, a little bit higher. That's why I have Bassitt ahead of Scherzer. And I've just seen Bassitt consistently post decent strikeout rate along with a really good ERA. But that would probably be my top 5 for the Cardinals targets.
Bassett's an interesting one, though. We haven't really talked a whole lot about. He's got another year of control next season. He signed through next year, like $21 million. So that's another thing to consider for the Cardinals. I don't know that that's like a quote-unquote value, $21 million. It's a lot to pay a starter, but he's been good for like 6 years now. He's basically been the same dude since 2018 or 2019. 2019 to today, he's been somewhere in the mid 3.5s. He's your classic number 3 starter in Major League Baseball. Honestly, Chris Bassitt is exactly what the league needs more of. Yeah. Like just a really good, solid, consistent 160 to 180 inning pitcher that's going to give you a mid-3s ERA every season of his career. That's who he is. And Cardinals could use that. They could use another one of those guys. They love. He fits a lot of what they have been targeting in recent months, really. So I could see them going that direction. I also don't think it would cost a ton to be able to get him because he's not a screaming value in terms of the money for next season. Yeah. A lot of teams don't want to add another year of control at $21 million for a guy like Chris Bassitt. They would rather go to the market this offseason and get somebody maybe that's a little better. So I don't think it's going to take a ton to get him. I think it will take less to get Chris Bassitt than Erik Fetty. And that may sound strange because you probably would view Chris Bassitt as better and certainly has more history than Fetty. But Fetty's making $7.5 million for this year and next, and that's just going to be more palatable for a lot of mid-market clubs.
Bassitt and Eovaldi feel like the same pitcher to me. And if you were putting both of them in front of me, I'd go Eovaldi because of the postseason success.
Totally agree.
And that's why he would have the upper hand over Chris Bassitt because although Bassitt has pitched 1 successful game in the playoffs, he's only pitched 3, and the last 2 haven't been pretty. I would go Eovaldi over Chris Bassitt.
Yeah, I think Eovaldi's going to be, barring something unforeseen, unless there's a pitcher that becomes available that we don't see right now as likely, Eovaldi would be number 1 for me on my list, and I don't see that changing. If I told you everything's clear, and I don't think this is going to be the case, just once again, everything's been clear, the Cardinals are in. Where would Jack Flaherty rank on this list for you?
If we're going off of performance base and belief that he was going to be the same player when he got to St. Louis.
And there's no way to know.
And I fall on the side where I don't believe it, but if that was the case, he would be number 1 on my list.
Over Eovaldi?
Yeah.
Oh, I would not have him over Eovaldi, but I would consider him.
His stuff is better than Eovaldi, and if I'm going off of the precedent of he's going to be the same pitcher for the rest of this season that he's been in Detroit, that's the best stuff I'm going to get.
Interesting. To me, if I was taking into account cost, because I think he's going to be more expensive to acquire than Eovaldi, Scherzer, Bassitt, I would have him 4. I would have those 3 players that I just mentioned ahead of him, but I would have him ahead of Kikuchi. I would have him as my top rental arm that's potentially available this year.
I think I would put him at 1 as well. Because
over Eovaldi, or Scherzer. Wow,
I think he's got the best stuff to Alex's point.
He gives your best chance to win.
Wow.
And if we're saying like it's approved and I can go get him, well, I want to go get the best arm that helps my rotation. And as much as I like Eovaldi, I think when you get Jack, now you're really talking about a great 1-2 punch with Sonny Gray, and you've seen him do it before. Like it's a different version of Jack, but you've seen Jack pitch as a number 1.
And that's fascinating.
And again, I wouldn't do it because I don't believe he's going to be the same pitcher here that he was in Detroit. I think you're going to get a fall off, and that worries me with a rental. So I would go the other 3, because I think I would go Jack over Fetty no matter what, because Fetty worries me that it's unrealistic that he sustains this. But I would go those other 3 over Jack because I don't know if I believe Jack is going to be the same guy the rest of the way.
Somebody on the text line said Eovaldi might not come as cheap as you think. I'm not saying Eovaldi's going to come cheap. I think that Bassitt will come relatively cheap because of that extra year.
I think Scherzer's cheaper than Eovaldi.
I agree.
Because of the uncertainty.
And he's making so much money that Texas is probably thinking,
Texas isn't paying much of it,
No,
though.
they're
I think he's
paying,
making like $20 million.
I don't even think it's that. I think it's like 16.
Yeah.
Like they're not paying a lot of it, and he's got no trade protection. So like he gets to say where he's going,
That's a
which
good
is the
point.
most important part in all of that.
Does Evaldi have any no trade protection?
I don't think so. I'd be shocked if he did.
I don't think so either. But man, what a good contract that was for them. Remember when we talked about potentially acquiring him on that deal, and people were like, "No, don't do that."
And what do we get instead?
Nothing. They didn't get anything.
Thought maybe that was your
offseason.
Mats.
No, that was last offseason. Not
The year of Mats.
Not the
What
year
a
that they
was.
got Lynn and Gibson. It was the year that they were like, "Oh, we've got like 7 different options in our rotation. We're going to be fine."
I'll never forget.
They got Waino.
I'll never forget Matt's pitching coach in
For
New
the same
York
amount of money.
when Matt's pitching coach from the Mets came on and he told us he was the best athlete
That
that
was
he
his
ever
pitching
coached.
coach. That was Terry Collins.
Oh, okay, even worse. Best
I
athlete.
forgot that was
and that dude
Collins.
hasn't stayed healthy his entire time here.
He said he'll immediately come in and be the fastest player on your roster. Yes, faster than Harrison Bader. And I was like, what?
Well, as
Are
we
they
know,
using him as a pinch runner?
we know, leg speed is important for this starting pitcher.
He's Alex.
They
That's
got hurt
T-Bone on
running the
BK. In
first.
15 minutes, we're going to dive into the junk drawer. But next, what can we realistically expect out of Jake Neighbours this season for the Blues? We'll tell you here on 101 ESPN.
Terry Hendricks here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals beat the Braves yesterday 6-2 as they take 2 of 3 from the Atlanta Braves, and they start a 3-game set at the Pittsburgh Pirates tonight. 5:40 is scheduled first pitch. Mitch Keller will be on the mound for Pittsburgh, and Andre Palante will get the start for St. Louis. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
So what are realistic expectations for Jake Neighbours heading into this season? There was a really good piece from Jeremy Rutherford over on The Athletic earlier today talking about looking back at last season for Neighbours and looking forward into what next year's going to be. Alex, he talked about adding a little bit of strength because he is going to be playing that net front presence type of a role for the Blues. That makes a lot of sense. I went into last season saying, hey, if you can get like 15 goals out of Jake Neighbours, that should be viewed as a massive success by the Blues. And then he went into the season and made me look like a complete and total idiot and finished with 27 on the year. So, yeah, that was a massive success. I don't know how realistic it is for that to sustain next year. If he went into next year and had, and maybe this is me being a hater, I don't believe it is. I'm not trying to be that.
You do that a lot with the Blues.
If he had 20 goals next year, I'd feel pretty good about it. I wouldn't view that as some massive failure by Jake Neighbours. I want to set expectations, for me at least, where they're reasonable. Alex, he's 22 years old. He's a really good player. I think he's going to help him again on the power play a decent amount at 8 goals there last year. What do you view as realistic for Jake Neighbours heading into the upcoming season?
I mean, look, if he's back-to-back 20-goal scorers in his first or 2 out of his first 3 years, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it is hard to be a consistent 20-goal scorer in the National Hockey League, especially when you're 22, 23 years old. Realistic expectations are just so tough with Jake Neighbours because the league is going to have more notice on Jake Neighbours this season. And it's in JR's article why he talked about adding some strength, because more teams are going to understand Jake Neighbours is going to park himself in front of the net. So they're going to have to be a little bit more physical. His name now is going to get circled by other coaches going into games against the Blues, whereas last year was Kyrou and Thomas and Buchnevich and other guys. So that's going to be the difference right now. But for me, reasonable expectations for Jake Neighbours is a 20 to 25 goal scorer next season because of the way he plays. If he scored those goals like Jakub Vrana scored his goals in the second half of 2 years ago, I would be all the way out of it because that stuff is so hard to sustain. You're talking about just getting goalies on off nights, picking the right corners. Sharpshooters don't last like power forwards last. And if you put on strength, the brand of hockey has been going for like the last 50 years of playing in front of the net and scoring goals. These are guys last season that scored more goals in the high danger area than Jake Neighbours. This is the list. Jake Neighbours falls under these guys: Charlie Coyle, Valerie Nichushkin, Kirill Kaprizov, Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, Philip Forsberg, Braden Point, Chris Kreider, Sam Reinhart, Zach Hyman. Kreider, 31 goals.
I love that guy.
Sustainable for me is going to be, are you able to hold your own in front of the net and take the beating and stay healthy? Because if you are, and you're playing with the right line mates, which I do think is one of the bigger pieces of Jake Neighbours' puzzle, to me, he could be 25 goal scorer, and the hope is you get to 30 goals because of that net front presence.
Yeah, I'm hoping that he can be just what he was last year. And I think the tough part is you just don't know. You don't know. And if he's not what he was last year, it leaves a lot of room for other guys to make up. And that's, like, when you're thinking about how good can the Blues be for this upcoming season, like, a big part of that is, where is that goal production coming from? Who is going to be scoring 25-plus goals for the Blues in 2024? And you run pretty thin pretty quickly if Neighbours isn't going to be one of those players for you. So they kind of need it out of him. And I hope he can do it, man. It's a really fun profile of player. He's one of my favorite players on the team to watch, and I love that he knows exactly who he is as a player, and he doesn't try to be anything more, and he knows exactly how to get the best out of those skills that he has. Something that is going to be interesting to me early on is how they utilize him.
That's going to be the biggest thing for me.
Who's the center with him? What line is he on? How does that line play? Are they able to do something more than just a transition game, one and done, boom, back into the defensive zone? Transition game, one and done, boom, back into the defensive zone. Because that's not the way that Jake Neighbours wins. Neighbours is going to win with a cycle game. Neighbours is going to win similarly in the offensive zone to like Ryan O'Reilly when he was here. That's the kind of player that he can be, or David Backus when he was here. So they've got to make sure that he's in positions to succeed this year.
It's the biggest reason why I don't want Kyrou to play on his line, and I don't want Pavel Buchnevich to be a centerman. Because to me, your best line, an ideal first line, is Neighbours, Thomas, and Buchnevich. Because you can't utilize a power forward if you're one and done. If you're enter the zone, take a shot, exit out of the zone, well, your power forward has no chance of sustaining any offensive ability because his place is in the front of the net. If you put Neighbours and Thomas and Kyrou together, to me, you're not going to get a 20-goal score from Jake Neighbours because you're going to do an awful lot of, oh, we lose the puck, we got to get back into the zone. If you keep Thomas and Buchnevich with Neighbours, to me, that's a puck possession line that can have a shooter, a playmaker, and a goal scorer in front of the net.
What if I told you Shin doesn't want to be a center this year? And I don't know that to be the case, but I'm just saying, like, in that scenario.
Then I would force Dalibor Dvorsky onto my NHL roster.
Do you want him with Kyrou? Because that's what you're doing.
Do I want him with Kyrou? No. Do I feel like it's best for the team? Yes. And then you got to come up with the right line mate to play. And honestly, if Shen's not a center, put Shen on the wing with those two.
Would you consider Dvorsky with Neighbours and Shen?
I wouldn't mind it. It would still be an option for me if I'm going Buch, Thomas, and Kyrou, because to me, that's another number one line. I have to have a playmaker and somebody who could keep zone time if I'm playing Jake Neighbours, because if Jake Neighbours is on a one-and-done line, you're not going to get a 25-goal score out of him.
He's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Alex, the other thing that you wanted to get to here about the Blues and a theme among their young players is the added strength that they're going to have. What stands out to you about this? Because Neighbours specifically mentioned in this interview with JR that he's going to be adding strength this offseason.
I think the one thing that really stuck out when I was reading it was just going off of our past interviews with these prospects. Go back to last year at the end of the season when we interviewed Bolduc, who talked about going into the offseason and making sure he couldn't get pushed off the puck easily. We heard Snuggerud talk about that. We heard Dvorsky talk a lot about that, and now you've got Neighbours referencing it. To me, it's why I feel like a lot of people are down on Kyrou a lot, because he does get pushed off the puck easily. And look at Thomas's transition. 2 years ago, he was a guy that we were talking about. I don't know if he could be your number one centerman because he can't sustain puck. He can't do puck zone time.
Playoff series, remember?
Yeah, Colorado.
Was it against Colorado?
Yeah, he kept getting pushed off the puck, and you're like, you can't do this. You're not even playing him in shorthanded time.
It's very clear that Ryan O'Reilly is your number one center. Thomas, it just feels like this is a little bit too physical for him.
And what did Robert Thomas do that offseason? He put on strength, and last year he became that number one centerman.
Different.
So to me, the difference between Kyrou and these guys that we're hearing about putting more strength and muscle on is the ability to not get pushed off the puck. That's how you have more zone time. That's how you have more ability to create offense. And I like the fact that Bolduc's talking about it. Neighbours is talking about it. Dvorsky obviously did that to himself. We saw it at training camp. I believe that's going to be a factor for the Blues if they can have more guys who are difficult to push off of the puck.
Coming up next, we're going to dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. All right, so I got a couple quick stories to share with you before Alex gets to what he did over the weekend. A couple of headlines. Cocaine sharks have been found in the waters off of Brazil.
Makes sense. Need a
Can't
new
wait for the
movie?
movie.
Yeah, we need a new movie, the sequel to Cocaine Bear.
The sharks may or may
amazing
not
start.
be eating bales of coke,
Vin
but a
Diesel.
positive drug test highlights the risk of pollution.
Vin Diesel's kids get eaten by a shark, cocaine shark, and then he does it for family.
That makes sense.
And then there's 9 of
You know
them.
what, I'm out.
And then there's 9 of them.
Another nature story. Florida police tell people to please stop taking selfies with the depressed black bear.
How do they know the bear's depressed?
County sheriff says the bear by the side of the highway in Santa Rosa Beach is, quote, clearly not in the mood for pictures right now, end quote.
And they just labeled it as a depressed bear?
He's upset. He doesn't want to take any more
What a
pictures.
headline.
Please stop. So that's what we got in the news world.
I can't even follow this up. Cocaine bears and depressed cocaine sharks and depressed bears.
Those are clearly the 2 biggest stories in the world right now in terms of the news.
What's
Yeah.
worse to
So,
take a
wanted to make
selfie
sure we
with, a
mentioned both of
cocaine
those.
shark or a depressed bear?
Probably cocaine shark.
I think it would be the bear.
I feel like I could punch the shark in the nose. I feel like I'm dead if that
Oh,
bear
you
gets
could.
next
You couldn't punch either of them in the bear.
in the nose.
Yeah. Yeah. That joke didn't land.
I couldn't punch either in the
Sure
bear.
didn't, Alex. What do you got
That
for us today,
joke
man?
didn't land at all. Okay, so you guys, so as we all know, I've got another kid coming soon, my wife pregnant, and the honey-do list has started to rise, and there have been a lot of things I've been doing around the house. I've been painting the baby's room. I've been putting cribs together. I've done a lot of painting. But then the other day, she's like, you know what would be really cool? If we had a fire pit. I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea. She goes, okay. And so she went away. I didn't know where she went. And like, I come outside. She goes, here, come here, look at this. She went outside and she used spray paint to spray paint a 19-foot circle
Sure.
in our lawn. And she's like, if you just dig this out, we could just lay some gravel down and we can do this. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I spent all weekend digging a hole in my backyard.
Remember when I took out those bushes in my backyard?
Yeah. Is it the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, no getting away from that one.
I don't remember that story, and I don't know if I want to know more.
Oh, I do. I remember the pictures he sent, and I'm like, yeah, you ruined my chainsaw.
Yeah.
He let me borrow my chainsaw, and he broke it. He gave it back to me.
Well, that sounds like a BK move.
I gave it back. It's
Now that
working.
you
was
say that,
broken.
Last I
do
used it,
remember.
it was still working.
Yeah, that's
all I
what
know.
he said in the text message to me.
I don't ever want to do anything like that again, so I do not envy what you had to do this weekend.
So luckily my brother-in-law came over too, and he was like, I'll help. And so we dug the perimeter of the circle out, and it felt like we were out there for like 6 hours yesterday doing it. And then we got done and we looked at it and we're like, we didn't even make any progress. I don't understand how people do manual labor. This is exhausting.
Yeah, everybody in our audience that does stuff that like is considered to be quote unquote manly work, God bless you, man. I don't know how you guys do it.
I mean,
and this weekend it was nice outside.
That's
like
the
it
thing.
was perfect weather. You couldn't have asked for anything better.
It had rained, which meant the lawn was easier to dig
Sure.
up. And I don't know if I'm just doing it incorrectly, but doing it
Probably.
with a shovel is very tough.
Yeah, you almost certainly
don't
are
know
doing
how-
it incorrectly.
No,
There's probably some kind of a tool that you can get from Home Depot that you could have gotten it done in like 2 hours. You might have even been able to rinse it because some of their stuff you can go in, rinse it, take it home for the day, take it back.
I don't think there's a tool for that. I think
I'm
it's just shoveling.
33 years old, and after I got done this weekend, and I'm not even done yet, I still have like half of the thing to dig out.
Somebody
I
else
felt like I was
explained that.
70.
Alex, all you need is 3 foot in diameter.
Huh?
3 feet in diameter is what you
19
need.
feet seems really big.
It's a very
3 feet's
large.
tiny though, because then you're sitting. Well, but we're digging it to where we like put the chairs in the fire pit, and you're not sitting in the fire. Like we're not just
Well, I
doing
wouldn't
it for the
expect you to
fire
sit in
pit.
the
We're doing
fire.
it to where like we could put chairs around it.
Yeah, but a 3 foot one, you could do that too.
Well, yeah, but then you're putting the chairs in the grass. We
Well,
want, we
okay,
want
but
it in the
I
rock.
see what you're saying. Well, yeah, but you could
We
do-
got like landscaping stones that we're going to do around it. It's like this whole big thing, and I'm like, oh, this is easy, and it's not easy.
Yeah. I'll take
So if you guys are free, maybe I should throw this out to the listeners. If you're free, I'll send you my address, and let's just
don't
teamwork
expect to
this.
get paid.
Hey, man, I know that none of your invitations to come to your house are real.
Well, they are if he's going to have you work
I was going
labor.
to say, if you work labor,
work
they're
for free.
absolutely real. I'll tell you what, I'll feed you.
Yeah, sure. He's Alex, the T-Bone. I'm
Well, not
BK.
you.
Coming up next, my last segment of the day. Let's not overlook the importance of this series against the Pittsburgh Pirates. We'll tell you about it here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK to tell you about my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion, and they can do that for you over at Victory Men's Health. They have 4 great locations across the St. Louis area, and you can check them out today at victorymenshealth.com. When you go over there, you can learn all about the things that they can do for you that can help you become your best version of yourself, whether that's some weight loss. You have weight loss goals that you've been trying to accomplish for weeks, months, maybe even years. They can help you optimize that over at Victory Men's Health. Low testosterone issues, if you've been dealing with that, maybe you have mood swings. You wake up in the morning, you don't feel rested. You're not getting the same amount from your same kind of results from your workouts. Low testosterone could be one of the reasons why. Erectile dysfunction issues. They can help you out with all of this over at Victory Men's Health. So check them out today. Again, 4 great locations across the St. Louis area. This is what I did. I went over there. I got the blood draw done, and they found out, hey, a little low on some of my vitamins, B12, vitamin D, and iron. So they helped me out with some supplements for all of that. You can do the same thing. Go check them out today. Unlock your inner champion. The place to do it is Victory Men's Health and victorymenshealth.com. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, so let's not overlook the importance of this series against the Pittsburgh Pirates, guys, because the Pirates are playing some good baseball right now. They just took 2 out of 3 against the Phillies, and they did that without Keller or Skeens on the mound. Those are the 2 guys that you're going to see in the first 2 games of this series. They also, prior to the All-Star break, took 2 out of 3 against the Milwaukee Brewers. We've seen how difficult that can be. They basically played a 50-50 series against the Cardinals, where 2 of those games ended up going to extra innings. They took 1 out of 3, but one of the losses were in extras against the Atlanta Braves as well. This is a team that has a really good 1-2 punch in their rotation right now, and I don't think the lineup really terrifies you, but Brian Reynolds is back to playing at an all-star caliber level once again. That's a guy that can beat you single-handedly in one of these games. Cardinals got to play some good baseball over the next few days, man, because quietly, the Pirates are only a couple games back of you in the wild card race, and it's not just them. The Mets are a game and a half back, along with the Diamondbacks and the Padres. This National League wild card, while none of these teams are great, is going to come down to the wire in terms of these teams all being bunched up like crazy right now.
The good news for the Cardinals is they got a bullpen game on Wednesday, and we all know how those typically go for the Cardinals. Yeah, bullpen games.
The way that this is scheduled for you, and this is what makes it really difficult, Palante versus Keller. Lynn versus Skeens.
Oh, that one, the Cardinals are so winning.
And potential bullpen game versus Perez on Wednesday. Martin Perez, who's not having a great year, but you don't have currently a starter announced for that game. This is not ideal in terms of the pitching matchups.
Here's the part that's concerning. Like, if you look at it, like both of these teams offensively are almost the exact same team. Like Cardinals have scored 415 runs, Pittsburgh's 414. Obviously, you'd give the upper hand to the Cardinals offense, but you're going that offense against that pitching staff. And for me, that's the part. The pitching is significantly better than what the Cardinals have to offer. And if you lose 2 of 3 in this series, it's not the end-all be-all. You're still in this wild card race. But 2 of 3 puts Pittsburgh in a position where they've gone like 10-2 or 10-3 in their last 13 games. And you, meanwhile, have been floating around 500 still. So I think Pittsburgh's a concern. Right now, Pittsburgh, Arizona, and the Mets are concerns if I'm the Cardinals. Not so much trying to pursue that top Central Division spot that the Milwaukee Brewers have, but it's more so not falling out of the wild card race.
If you're looking for how do they beat you, what's the offense looks like so far in this month? Brian Reynolds has been amazing, OPS over 1,000 this month. O'Neal Cruz is getting hot again, and we know he goes through the ebbs and flows, kind of similar to Nolan Gorman. Got to be really hot for a little while, and then he's going to strike out 100 times. Rowdy Tellez has been back to hitting the ball really hard once again. He has 4 home runs in 14 games so far this month. Those are the 3 guys that you got to worry about in their lineup heading into this series. And then, more importantly, they just have 2 starters that you're going to be going up against this series that are amazing. I mean, Mitch Keller has been awesome for them so far this year, and Paul Skeens is, depending on where he ends up with his innings, going to be in the conversation for the National League Cy Young. That's how good he has been so far this year. And those are the 2 guys that you're going to be facing over the next 2 days.
Yeah. And then on top of it, and I know you've seen him once, but you're not going to see him in this series, Jared Jones. So then they've got...
And he's on the IL right now, but...
They've got a dynamic 1 through 3 that if it comes down to a tight race down the stretch, Pittsburgh's one of those teams that I'd be a little concerned about, just like Arizona, who's turned it on right now, which if you're the Cardinals, like Katie said, you got to keep picking up wins. You have to continue to win series after series if you want to not only chase the Brewers, but keep your spot in the National League wildcard race.
Especially against a team like the Pirates, because I don't know what they're going to do at the deadline. Like, if I'm them, I'm probably not... I'm not chasing it too much this year because I feel like I'm kind of a year ahead of schedule. I think next year is really the year that they should be going for it. And they should do stuff via free agency and then certainly next year at the deadline as well. But if they keep playing some quality baseball over the next week or so, they could probably convince their ownership / front office, hey, maybe it is time for us to go for it. The reason why is because of who they're playing going into the deadline. So they've got you for 3, and then they go head-to-head against Arizona on the road for 3. And then they'll play a game before the deadline against Houston as well. If they perform well against those teams, Philly, St. Louis, Arizona, and a game against Houston, going into the trade deadline, it's going to be hard to not buy into that if you're their front office. And you mentioned it, Alex. They're one of the teams that scare you. If I'm looking at the wild card and thinking through, okay, who are the teams that get into a 3, 5, 7 game series, they scare you a little bit in this wild card race, I don't think the Mets really scare me, if I'm being candid. The teams that would scare me are the Diamondbacks and the Pirates. Mm-hmm. Because the Diamondbacks, when they get healthy, will have a pretty good pitching staff. And that offense has been awesome so far this year. The offense hasn't been the problem. They just haven't pitched, and a lot of that's because of injuries. And then the Pirates have the pitching that can scare you. And if they add a few bats, they're not going to be a ton available, but if they add a couple of them, it could be a team that is more interesting than currently feels heading into the postseason this year in the National League.
That's where I am, is Pittsburgh's the team that can be last year's Arizona. Now, granted, I don't know if they have the offensive pieces to do it, but like if Brian Hayes gets hot for a month, O'Neal Cruz gets hot for a month.
Because your pitching can win if you only score 2-3 runs.
The one thing that typically doesn't go cold for like significant stretches is elite starting pitching. And that's the one thing that Pittsburgh has. It's the one thing Arizona has. Heck, it's the one thing San Diego has. If Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish come back and are right, and they've got Dylan Cease, who's been good, not great, but he's their number 3. Like, those are the kind of teams that really scare you. When you look at their rotation, you go, okay, when those guys are right, they can potentially pitch to where they can hold teams scoreless, and it's just a matter of does one offensive bat get hot.
It also speaks to why the Cardinals need to add another starter at the deadline. Like, you look at Arizona, they've got 3 legitimate front-end starters in their rotation. Padres, same thing. Pirates, same thing. Cardinals don't. Cardinals are the one team out of that group, out of that mix, that does not have that type of starting pitching. I think there's a decent chance that the Braves end up falling out of this thing, by the way, guys. They've got an offense, and we saw it over the weekend in one game. They can do it, but their pitching is falling apart in terms of the injuries. Their offense now is going to be without Albies for the next 6 to 8 weeks. They're already without Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, Riley's amazing, and he's been tearing it up over the last month or so, but Olsen hasn't been the same guy as he was a year ago.
Is out.
It's just they're not the same team, and they are in a really difficult division as well, so that's going to play into this a little bit. I could see a scenario where Atlanta falls out a little bit, and these teams that we're talking about with the pitching are the ones that start to rise in the second half of the season, and this is another reason why you need to be one of those teams that goes out and adds pitching.
Yeah.
To be able to push yourself into that kind of a conversation.
I mean, in all honesty, like the two teams that could be at risk of falling out, like the Mets are this as well, but the Cardinals and Braves, if you're talking about the Pirates, Padres, and Diamondbacks finding a way to turn it on, you've got 6 teams now fighting for 3 spots, and the Cardinals still with the chance of chasing down the Brewers, although that comes down to those series like we've talked about once you take on Milwaukee. But after watching Atlanta, and I mean, you've won both series against them. You're better than Atlanta.
I agree.
The question is, are you better than Pittsburgh? And you'll find out in this series, are you better than Arizona? Because those are the teams that I think are going to be breathing down your neck, and those teams are elite in one area. And I don't think the Cardinals are elite in any area. I think they're just really good in all 3.
I think they're borderline elite in their bullpen. I think they need, if they add at the deadline to their bullpen, I think you can be elite there. I don't know if you're elite defensively. I think you're really good defensively. That's probably it. You could argue they're elite with their left-handed hitting. Like I don't know if that's like
I don't know if you can with
left-handed hitting against the pitchers for the Pirates. I would give the edge to the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, like to your point, the Pirates have an elite 1, 2, 3 in their rotation, like an elite playoff rotation.
The Diamondbacks,
the Cardinals don't have an elite lineup, and that's really what matters. It doesn't really matter if you've got like 3 dudes in your lineup that are really good from one specific side of the plate. Are you elite as a team hitting? And the Cardinals are not right now. I can't make that case. There's no way I can, even if I was trying to make it.
You give him time though. He'll be opportunistic later on in the season.
Schindler's going to hit a home run tonight. They're going to win like 1-0.
Did you say Carp will hit one?
No, I said Newt.
Oh, I thought you said Carp. I'm like, really?
Said Carp. I mean, he could do it too.
We're in second half Newt. It's prime Newt.
It's peak Lars season.
Oh,
yeah, we're ready for
prime Newt, Pete Clark, same thing.
Still waiting for it though.
I'm getting out of here. I got a doctor's appointment for little man later on this afternoon here in about 20 minutes or so. So I got to get over there for that. But Alex and T-Bone will have you guys taken care of over the course of the next 45 minutes. But before I get out of here, I'm in a good mood. So I'm going to give you a chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash for the Cardinals versus the Rangers next Tuesday night. If I'm not mistaken, that's the deadline day.
Deadline day.
Maybe we'll see Rangers in town.
With the Valdi
just
walking
come
across
from one clubhouse to the other the day of the deadline.
Scherzer would make sense.
And you could be there for all of that action next Tuesday night. If you text in right now, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Texter number 101 with the correct answer to the question that I'm about to ask you is getting a pair of tickets to see the Cardinals versus the Rangers July 30th at Busch Stadium for the Bud Bash game. The question is as follows. Alex is going to be digging a ditch in his backyard. It is for a fire pit. How big is that ditch? If you have the correct answer to that question, your texter number 101, you're going home with that 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Coming up next, Alex and T-Bone will get a game of in or out. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line. In or out next here on 101 ESPN.
314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. Along with Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK getting out of here. We'll be back with us tomorrow as we enter our in or out segment, and we'll have to seek through all of the texts of sending in the answer to the question that BK asks prior to the commercial break. But we will get your in or out scenarios now. You can send them to our Air Comfort Service text line. Also send them over on our YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cam is brought to you by the Air Alliance team. I'll start this one off, T-Bone. In or out, the final 3 wildcard teams at the end of the season will be the Cardinals, the Pirates, and the Diamondbacks.
Oh. So the Braves fall out,
and the Mets fall out,
and
the Padres don't get in.
Make it. Oh, man.
And what's wild about this is, like, the Cubs, even though I know they suck, they're still 3.5 out. The Giants are 3 out. The Reds are 4 out. Everybody's still in this.
I'm gonna say out, and the reason I say out is I'm not gonna buy that Pittsburgh gets in. I think one of San Diego, the Mets, and we didn't even talk about them, San Fran are the one that gets in.
Oh, you think San Fran gets in?
We talk about elite pitching. Think of the 3 arms that they can have.
It's true.
They can have, now granted,
Blake Snell
hasn't really pitched well this year when he's been healthy, but Blake Snell can be that guy. Won a Cy Young last year for a reason.
Logan Webb is that guy.
And Robbie Ray they've got coming back from Tommy John surgery. So, like, they've got 3 legit arms. I don't know how well Ray's going to be built up or even get built up before then, but if he can, there's a chance that they've got. I just don't buy into Pittsburgh because I don't buy their offense. Brian Hayes, to me, one of the most overrated players in Major League Baseball, and they paid that freaking guy, and I don't know why. Brian Hayes is really good. O'Neal Cruz, too streaky, and they have him hit like 4 or 5 on occasion. Imagine the Cardinals doing that. You know, the reason that you can play Gorman through his slums because you can hit him 8th in the Cardinals lineup. Pirates don't have that luxury, so I'm going to say out just because I don't think Pittsburgh will make the playoffs.
Is it possible we could see 3 new wild card teams at the end of the season that aren't even in the wild card right now? Like, could we see the Diamondbacks, Padres, and Pirates? I know you just said you don't believe in the Pirates, but could we see those 3 or even the Giants and Braves, Cardinals, Mets not be in the wild card? That is wild.
The way this NL is played out so far, and the Braves just keep getting hurt, I could totally see it. Because we mentioned, I don't remember what month, I guess it was in mid-June, that when you look back in I say history, but like 2 years of this new format, June's when everybody separates.
Yeah.
Like, you end up with like 5 teams competing for those final 3 playoff spots. That hasn't happened in the National League. You look at the AL, that happened. Like, the American League is now down to Yankees, Twins, Royals, Red Sox, and Seattle. Those are really the 5 teams that are competing for it. Everybody else is now kind of fallen out of it in the American League. So I could totally see where we end up in that kind of situation.
T-Bone, what do you got?
In or out? Lars Nootbaar will be the number 5 hole hitter for the Cardinals once we get to October.
It just comes down to how much you believe in peak Lars. I'm going to say out because I think that 5-hole hitter is going to be one of Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt. I understand that Ollie moved him down to the 7-hole. I don't think that's going to sustain. I think that was a wake-up call for Goldie, and all he needs to do is get a couple of good at-bats, and they'll put him right back. Yeah, and then with Nolan Arenado, he's still making contact, even if the power's not there. I'm going to say out. I think 1 through 4 is going to be some type of combination of Wynn, Burleson, Wilson Contreras, and Brendan Donovan or Lars Nootbaar, one of those 2, and then Goldy or Arenado at 5.
I'm going to say in because I think you're going to see Nootbaar kind of piece it all together. And when or if he does, I just don't think there's an argument to have Arenado 5. Now, I know that they want to avoid those lefty lanes that they talk so much about, so it would be kind of hard to maneuver around that. But I think you can argue you could go, well, no, you can't. There's no real lefty lane that you could avoid, I guess. At some point, you'd have 2 lefties because they're so left-handed heavy, and it's why they need a right-handed bat. But I'll say in because if Nootbaar can piece it together, now you've got kind of the ideal 5-hole hitter, a guy that can get on base, can hit for some average, but also has like 20 homer pop in his bat. That's what you need, and they need 3 big boppers. They've got 2, Burley, Contreras, who's the guy that takes that as that like 3rd role, whether that means Newt's hitting cleanup or that means Newt's hitting 5th. They've got to find a 3rd impact bat because we talk about it. What do you need in October? 3 impact bats. We say 3 elite starters. I'm starting to question that one. And 4
Cardinals
impact
just need
relievers.
one. Yeah.
So, and that's why they need somebody to take that reign.
Yep. All right, let's get to some of your scenarios. You send us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are in or out. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. In or out, one of Carpenter, Lynn, or Helsley will still be a Cardinal next year.
Carpenter, Lynn, or Helsley under contract? I wonder if they make Gibson.
Unless it's an arbitration.
Yeah. Well, Helsley will be here.
Yeah.
So
I don't think
let's take him out and let's replace him with Gibson.
Helsley. Okay, so put Gibson.
So it's
like
Gibson, Lynn, and Carpenter. One of those 3.
I would say in on that one because I think Carpenter will retire. I don't think they bring back Lance Lynn, depending on what they get at this trade deadline. I think that will be Lance Lynn's spot by next year. And frankly, I think it's also Andre Palante that should get that spot. I'll say in, though, because I think Kyle Gibson will be here.
That's kind of where I am. I can't see a scenario where they don't pick up his option at the bare minimum. If Carp retired, he'd be on the bench as a coach. So, because he brings good vibes, if you haven't heard.
I've heard that. I've heard a lot of these guys do.
So I'll say in because I definitely think they pick up Gibson. I'm actually not that opposed to picking up Lynch. Now, if they get somebody at the deadline with control, like a Fetty, a Bassett, someone like that, okay, now I understand where you let him walk at the end of the year, and then you can kind of, I guess, go Palante in that 5 spot. You can kind of go Palante. Problem is like you don't have a guy like break glass in case of emergency.
Yeah.
Because who's the guy that then's behind him? That's why I almost say like you pick up Lynn's option. He's the number 5 starter. You have Palante, whether he starts in Memphis, and you wait for that kind of AA shuttle to make its way up towards AAA and up to the majors. That's where you get into having that actual depth conversation, unlike last offseason where in the same sentence I heard, well, Drew Rom was our 6th. Also, we started guys last year that weren't big leaguers. And I can connect the dots.
I think the hope is at least one of those AA guys develops enough that he can be the break class. I think Andre Palante is a better version of Lance Lynn. And if you have Lance Lynn back, you're stunting the ability to get more opportunities for Andre Palante. But, I mean, the Cardinals obviously need that break glass because look at what Wednesday is. Wednesday's going to be Matthew Liberatore and a bullpen game.
Here, I came up with another one for you here.
Yeah.
In or out, Lance Lynn will still be in the Cardinals rotation post-trade deadline.
I'm going to say in because I don't think they have another role for him. And I'm assuming they're going to get one guy, and one guy takes Andre Palante's spot. I don't like it. I think Andre Palante should be that guy, but then Andre Palante, I would imagine, moves into your bullpen, and days like Wednesday, that's Andre Palante's start, and otherwise he's a long man for you in the bullpen. There's no other role for Lance Lynn. You're not going to use him out of the bullpen, and unless he's got some phantom injury that keeps him out for the rest of the season, I think he's still in the rotation.
So I actually don't mind if you moved Lynn to the bullpen. Now, they would never do it just because he's a veteran, he's a starter.
It's good vibes, man. You can't take those away.
But, like, when you look at his numbers, he has a 659 OPS against right-handed batters. Right-handers are 12% below league average against him. Lefties are the one that give him trouble. Lefties are 27% above league average going up against Lance Lynn. So there's a role for Lance Lynn in the pen. But I agree that they're not going to probably pull him out. They'll go with the whole veteran thing. But what I'm fascinated to know is what do you do with Palante? Because I don't know where he fits in the bullpen.
Yeah.
Because I like what they have in kind of Roycroft as that Memphis shuttle guy. Mm-hmm. And, like, his stuff looks dynamic that I'm willing to kind of just play it out by ear. And if you get another high-leverage arm, I assume he's taking that role. Or are you getting rid of Gio? But, again, do you cut bait with Gio and put Palante in the pen? Or do you keep Palante stretched out in the minors? I don't know what they're going to do with Palante. My guess is he's going back to Memphis, and he's just going to start, and they've got him ready in case another injury pops out.
Not to keep in or outing Lance Lynn segments, but this one just popped into my mind. Does he make the playoff roster? I don't think he does. Like, let's say it's a 3-game wild card series. I don't think he makes that roster. I think you're carrying more bullpen arms.
3-game, no. 5-game and 7-game, I'd say yes.
I don't think he does. You're going to have the guy that you acquire, Michaelis, Gibson, Sonny Gray.
But I think,
I mean, you're already carrying 4 guys as starters.
That 4th game, my guess is they would probably, I don't know how new school they'd go. You can either replace him with an O'Brien, a Roycroft, or a Leahy, or you can carry Lynn, who I just mentioned's got a lane.
And I'd rather have Lynn over Roycroft or Leahy.
And like game 4, for example, because that's the game we're talking about, you could like piggyback Michaelis and Lynn. So Michaelis goes one time through the order, Lynn goes one time through the order. Boom! Now we've covered, in theory, 5 to 6 innings, and now you can turn it over to those high leverage arms. You kind of bridge it instead of Michaelis, where you go, okay, we'll go 5, 6 innings with him, which I don't trust him to do, or Lynn 5 or 6 innings. I don't trust him to do. You kind of piggyback those two because that's what the Rangers did in Game 4. They would go with better pitchers, but they would go with Heaney and Gray in like 2-3 inning spurts, and they would then piece it together to their bullpen in Game 4.
From the 314, in or out, Robert Thomas has 100 points this season.
Ooh.
This one's interesting. So he finished last year with 86 points, and he played every single game. So you're talking about adding 14 more points.
How many goals did he have last year?
He had 26, which I think is probably the sweet spot. Maybe you could get to 30 with him. Then you're talking about 10 more assists. Here's the thing. Robert Thomas on the power play last season, 8 goals and 19 assists. He had 27 points. I'll say in because if they utilize Pavel Buchnevich correctly, in my opinion, and that's playing him on the wing with Robert Thomas, he could get to 30 goals, probably talking about 4 more assists. If your power play has any significant bump in play, you could see that 100-point season. You're talking about 14 more points throughout an 82-game schedule, and it really comes down to his guys around him and consistency, but I'll say in.
I think I'll say out because I think you would need a couple more goals. The assists, I could see where you could add a couple there, but I think he almost need to be like a 35-goal scorer, 30 to 35.
Yeah.
And I think you're right around that like 25, 26 mark will probably typically be his sweet spot. And I actually think the power play could be worse this year.
Yeah, there's a chance.
I mean, it was bad when they had Krug quarterbacking the power play unit 1, and they just don't have a slap shot on that. And that's going to be the same thing. And I'm not really going to buy into the net front presence will help boost the power play throughout the full season. So I'll say out. I think he'll be a point-per-game guy. I don't know if he'll take that step to 100 points.
In or out, Mizzou has a Heisman finalist on the team this year.
So that would probably just be Burden.
You don't think Cook could get there?
No.
You'd have to put up significant numbers if you're Cook, but
yeah, I mean,
Burden puts up numbers.
Unbelievable numbers, too.
Yeah, that's why I think I would go more Cook than Burden. Because Burden's got to do Devontae Smith type of numbers.
Yeah, and he could do that.
Yeah.
Like, he's got the talent to do it. I'm going to say out. I'm just going to play the field and say out, but I think I don't know if we brought this conversation on air or not. I know we talked about it in the office. Everything blurs together. College football feels like it's kind of in the spot of college basketball last year.
Yeah.
Where a bunch of those big names kind of graduated out. You think of the Bo Nix, you think of the Michael Penix, all those quarterbacks. And those were all kind of the Heisman favorite, the guys that were kind of talked about. And some of the wide receivers as well, Harrison, Dunze.
Yeah.
Feels kind of like I don't want to call it nameless, but not as big a names going into this season. So if there's a year for a Missouri player to do it, I could see the argument for this being the year. I mean, there's a reason the college football video game had Burden as the 11th best player.
Yeah. I'm with you there. I'll say in. I think either Burden or Cook could put themselves into that conversation if they have one good year with this offense. All right, let's do this final one before we hit our break. In or out, Alec Burleson gets 100 RBIs this season. He's at 59 right now. When was the last time a 25-year-old on the Cardinals put up 100 RBIs in a season?
Probably
Pujols?
Albert. I was going to say, I can't think of anybody else that would have been that
Albert
young.
did it.
Holiday did it, but he wasn't 25.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was anybody else.
Did Alan Craig get there?
No, I don't think he's ever healthy enough for 100. I could be wrong, but I'm going to say out. I don't think he'll get to 100 RBIs.
Yeah, Albert did it when he was 21 years old.
Such a stud. God. I'll say out. I think he'll get close, but I don't think he'll get to 100, especially since he's hitting in kind of the 2 spot.
Yeah.
I think that's where they're probably going to keep him throughout the rest of the season. I'll say he gets to 85 plus, but won't get to 100.
Damn, Alan Craig, he didn't get 100, but he had 92 and 97 when he was 27 and 28 years old.
That was better than I thought.
I thought that he was going to have a step back. I thought he was going to regress in the second half. And, I mean, all signs are pointing towards this dude just continuing it. So I'll say optimistically here. I mean, we were talking 41 more with, 63 more games to play? I mean, Alec Burleson has shown the ability to just keep this thing rolling. So I'll say in. I think you get 100 RBIs from him.
And if you look at his projections in terms of, on pace for, currently on pace for 29 homers, 97 RBIs.
Dude.
So, I mean, a hot week, and he could end up being at that point that you're talking about.
Any other players that could get to 100 RBIs this season? Because Contreras isn't going to get there. I don't think you're going to see anybody else.
it would have to be early because they've never really had a consistent 3-4 spot, and Contreras' injury takes him out of that.
What a season for Alec Burleson. And speaking of that, when we come back from our break, are the Cardinals changing their tune about the ability to win without Goldschmidt and Arenado? We'll get into that and an update on Tommy Edman next year on BK and Ferrario.
Terry Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. The Cardinals beat the Braves yesterday 6-2 as they take 2 of 3 from the Atlanta Braves, and they start a 3-game set with their division rival, the Pittsburgh Pirates, tonight in Pittsburgh. 5:40 will be first pitch. Andre Palante gets the start for the Cards, and Mitch Keller will be on the mound for the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Driven deep to right. That one's going a long way if fair. It is on the roof of the chop house. Oh, baby, what a bomb by Burleson.
Alec Burleson and really Mason Wynn, Brendan Donovan, Wilson Contreras have continued to carry this Cardinals offensively on their shoulders. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario as the Cardinals get set to return in action tonight against the Pittsburgh Pirates. They start a massive 3-game series in the National League that really could dictate giving space between you and the Pittsburgh Pirates or putting the Pirates within 1 game or potentially leading you by 1 game at the end of this 3-game series. And what the Cardinals did over the weekend in terms of pushing Paul Goldschmidt down to 7th in the lineup, T-Bone, that was something that you and I didn't believe the Cardinals would do. For me, it just felt like it's the Cardinals, and what they do is they respect legacy types of players, and a Paul Goldschmidt, despite his struggling offensively, is going to say somewhere in the top 5. And they didn't. Over the weekend, they pushed him down to the 7 hole, and it obviously worked, him hitting a home run in that game. Now, I'm going to do a spoiler for the lineup game, so if you don't want to ruin the lineup game for the fast lane, here's your chance to turn the radio down right now. 3, 2, 1. Paul Goldschmidt is once again hitting 7th in the lineup. I know. Who would have thunk? But I think this is Ollie, and I'll give him credit because I did not expect him to do this. This is Ollie saying that the Cardinals' best chance to win offensively is without Goldschmidt and somewhat Arenado, although he's still hitting in the top 5. It's without those 2 guys being the impact bats for us. The impact bats are quite obviously Alec Burleson, Wilson Contreras, and Brendan Donovan, because those 2 guys are the ones that consistently are hitting in pivotal spots with your lineup. And I didn't buy that the Cardinals could win that way because you still need, I think, 5 dangerous bats in your lineup. But, man, they are proving me wrong right now because Burleson, we just talked about, potentially pushing for 100 RBIs this season. Wilson Contreras has been an MVP even with missing an entire month due to his injury. And Brendan Donovan is the exact same player he always has been. Having those guys carry your team offensively, that's the reason this Cardinals team is a chance to push for the NL Central title.
Yeah, I find myself kind of torn on this because I thought all season long both Goldy and Arenado had to hit for the Cardinals to win. Now I don't necessarily sit there. I just think they need one more bat to get going. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be Arenado and Goldy.
You just need somebody to hit in the 5 hole.
Yeah, whether it's Nootbaar, whether it's Gorman goes through another one of those like 20-game stretches where he looks like the best player on the planet. You just need somebody to kind of fill out that 5 spot. Because you're right. I think when you look at some of the best offensive lineups in baseball, you can go 1 through 5 and say, man, that is a gauntlet. And then 6 through 9 is typically where it falls off. And if you've got Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman, and whoever else is hitting in that bottom part of your lineup, that's a freaking good lineup. And I know Goldie struggled. He's still got some pop in his bat and could run into one in October. I think where I am a little hesitant to say, can they win without Goldy and Arenado? Yes, but they still need one more bat to come to the ballpark and be a factor every single day. And right now, look, they're hitting Arenado 5, and it looked like a good weekend for him. He had 2 hits. One of them was a home run, the other was like a single.
Yeah. In Goldschmidt, the game where he hit a home run, he also struck out twice.
Yeah. So it still hasn't been what you're used to in the same old of Goldy and Arenado. They just need one bat. And again, I don't think it has to be them. If Nootbaar goes on a tear, if Gorman goes on a tear, then you can move them up into that 5 spot, because you're right. I think you need to be 1 through 5. You need to look at that and go, okay, I don't know how we're going to get through this. It's going to be a gauntlet to get through it. And right now, I think it drops off at 4. Arenado's just hitting for average. There's no threat of power. I think that 5 spot's got to have not only a guy that plays well, but has some pop that he can bring to the order too.
What's interesting about it is now you have gone from starting the season where it felt like you win when you get complementary pieces like Burleson and Wynn and Gorman coming through for you. Now it feels like Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado have become the complementary pieces, which is one, relying on young players to keep contributing, which is, I mean, it's always a tough ask. Like, this is playoff baseball. And, man, you find out if you got gamers, if Burleson can perform at this time of the year, if Wynn can perform at this time of the year. You already know Wilson Contreras can perform at this time of the year. If we're talking about Goldschmidt and Arenado being complementary pieces, yes, it's a bad thing, but it's a bad thing if you lose Burleson and Wynn and Donovan. But if those guys continue, those are some pretty damn good complementary pieces to have in terms of, you know that there's MVP potential with those players, and if you're relying on them to come through in one big game, that's a nice position to be in. But again, it comes down to relying on these younger players, which it puts the Cardinals in a really good future position if these guys continue to perform this way for one whole season.
Yeah, I think when you look at them kind of long term, Now, we'll see on Burley. Like, he's the guy that we'll have to determine if this is a one-off or if this is who Alec Burleson is. But if this is who Burleson is, and you know Donovan and Wynn, they're going to be guys that their struggles are a little different. But you've got those 4 guys that fit into your core. And then it's just a matter of, can Newbar put together a full season? You know, and then Arenado kind of falls into what you're talking about, being a complementary piece. I'm fascinated to see how these guys play down the stretch because
me too.
You mentioned kind of that clutch gene. You know who gave them the best at bat when they went up against Paul Skeens last time? One Goldy, one Arenado. It was Alec Burleson.
Yeah.
And if he can do that against Skeens, he's going to be fine when they go up against some October pitching.
It's the one thing that they lacked in those last few years when they got bounced in 1 game in a wild card or in 2 games in a wild card. They lacked one of those younger players being able to perform on that stage. Like, it always felt like Tyler O'Neill couldn't do it. It felt like Bader couldn't do it. Gorman, you saw a little slice of it. Even Brendan Donovan really wasn't able to do it that first taste. If you get a Burleson or a Mason Wynn coming through in that moment, that is massive for this team. Also, what could be massive for this team is Tommy Edman's return. And why massive was that right-handed bat that we were talking about, and the center fielder, the outfielder that they potentially could go trade for. I'm continuing to believe that Edman is not going to be back this season. For those that missed it over the weekend, Derek Gould reporting with the Post-Dispatch that Tommy Edman's return to the majors has been delayed again, this time by that ankle injury that's been nagging him, forcing him to go at least 9 days in between games for his rehab. As much as we want to see Tommy Edman back in terms of that versatility, you got a guy who can hit from the right side. You got a guy who goes up, can play the center field position, second base. I don't know if we're going to see Tommy Edman back this season. Maybe we get to late September and he's able to return, but the amount of delays and time in between games that they've had to rest him, this feels like something that Tommy Edman it's an uphill battle that I'm not sure you're able to come back from.
Yeah, I think he'll be back at some point, but I'm not, planning my trade deadline around him because A, he's not going to be back before the trade deadline, and B, because he's coming off of a major wrist injury, I don't know how his bat's going to play. So if that's the way I'm operating, sure, I want Tommy Edman on my roster when it gets down to crunch time in September, late August, maybe even in October, probably in October, because he's got speed and he can play good defense and the bat might be an extra. They need to operate on the assumption of, okay, he should take Crawford's spot when he comes back in terms of if they haven't added a right-hand bat. If you add a right-handed bat, he takes Carlson's role.
Yeah.
Because there is a role for both a right-handed bat and Tommy Edman on this roster post-trade deadline, and it should be the idea of, okay, we don't know what we're going to get out of Tommy Edman offensively or, to your point, if at all. So what do we need to do? We need to add a right-handed bat that can go out there and play in the outfield and can provide a little bit of pop against left-handed pitching, and plan on Tommy Edman just being I'll call him a quote-unquote defensive-minded or an extra piece, whatever you want to call him, when he comes back. He has a role on this team, but so does a right-handed bat. That shouldn't deter the Cardinals away from going from we've got Tommy Edman at some point coming back. We don't need the right-handed bat. No, you need the right-handed bat. You can also have Tommy Edman with the right-handed bat on the roster, but it means you're going to have to make some tough roster decisions, and you probably have to DFA probably a Brandon Crawford.
Yeah, which, would make the most sense. You're talking about a guy who could play short, play second, play the outfield and the bench, or the bat off of the bench, which, frankly, you can never have enough bat options coming off of the bench for a team that has lacked those all season long. He's Tanner Hendricks, and I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take our final break. We'll come back and hit the rewind as we close things down here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Closing it down on today's show, BK and Ferrario Rewind along with Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario as BK had to duck out to a doctor's appointment with his little one. He'll be back with us tomorrow. Had a really fun show today, talking a lot of baseball after a Cardinals series win over the weekend against the Atlanta Braves, and a pretty crucial one for a team that now has the tiebreaker against the Atlanta Braves. We talked with Erik Kratz, former Major League catcher, also co-host of the Foul Territory podcast. You can hear our conversation with him about the trade deadline. Also chatted with Katie Wu, got her insight on the Cardinals of the Athletic. You can check all that out on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. And thank you to our friends at Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We'll wrap it up with what we started with today, T-Bone, and that's the victory that the Cardinals had against the Braves over the weekend and how they went about it. They lose the first game of the doubleheader, mostly because your offense doesn't come through. Kyle Gibson gets yanked. A lot of people talking about that was more your team not scoring runs than anything. But then you go out there, and the second game of the doubleheader, you score 9 runs against the Braves. And the one for me that I thought was most impactful was on Sunday, where you scored 6 runs. 4 of those came off of solo shots, and that was the day following a doubleheader for the Cardinals team. And it was pretty evident after you took 2 of 3 against the Atlanta Braves. The path to success this second half and into the postseason, we talk so much about upgrading their pitching staff, and it's a necessity. We talk so much about locking down the MVP of their team this season, and that's been the bullpen. But if you want to have any secondary success this season, it's going to come off of the power. Seeing Goldschmidt hit the solo shot, Arenado hit the home run, you saw Burleson do it again, Lars Nootbaar, Brendan Donovan. Those are the guys that are going to carry you this season, and unless you have power, you're not going to have a whole lot of success.
Yeah, it is so hard to win in modern baseball by a single. It's so hard to do it. Yeah. And you saw that early on in the season for the Cardinals when they weren't hitting for any power. Over the weekend, you saw that. Yeah, they had the one game where they lose 3-2, but they could have won that game. You know, they turned things over to their bullpen. I have no issues with the way Ali Marmol handled that game from a pitching perspective. And then the offense slugs, does its job. Slug, baby, slug. There's a reason I've been preaching about it for so long since I joined the show, is it's the way to win in modern baseball. You can do damage. You can do it with one swing of the bat, put a run on the board. And the nice part about it for the Cardinals was you saw it from about everybody. And I think Ali said this post-game, I don't remember if it was Sunday or Saturday, but that's what the lineup's supposed to look like, where you get guys like Nootbaar, you get guys like Donovan, you get Contreras hitting home runs, you get Goldschmidt and Arenado with a home run over the weekend. That's how the lineup's supposed to look like, where any one of those guys 1 through 7 can have some pop in their bat, get Burleson with multiple home runs. That's what they're going to have to do in the home stretch of the season. If this team can find a way to kind of climb up the rankings of, I'm going to say OPS rather than just slugging, if they can find a way to really climb up and get into the top 10, that means probably 2 things happened. One, it means that Gorman got hot and Nootbaar got hot. Your left-handed bats played well down the stretch. And 2, it probably means your 2 right-handed bats, Goldy Arenado, played well down the stretch. And you then can go into October with that slug, baby, slug mantra that I've been talking about for years.
If you can show the ability to win games to where you give your team wiggle room, and I'm not talking about what you did on Saturday night where you score 3 runs in the 9th inning, although that is much needed. If you could give your team wiggle room in the 4th or 5th inning in terms of running away with certain games, that's where you can really start to believe and dream on this team, because you know they can win with the bullpen shutting things down. You know they can win in a comeback fashion. We've seen all of that. That's how they got to 52 wins this season. What we haven't seen is what they did on Sunday, where you win it 6-2, and you're talking about technically closing things down by the 6th or 7th inning. That's the element of the season that I have yet to see from the Cardinals, and all of that comes back to the slug. All that comes back to the power. All of that comes back to, are you getting more than just ball or bat to ball, getting on base and running? Are you getting it from Burleson, from Nootbaar, from Donovan, and as we just talked about earlier, one of Goldschmidt or Arenado? Because if you're getting that, your team becomes much more dangerous. And we talked trade deadline with Katie Wu and Erik Kratz today, and I just saw this from the Houston Astros GM who was on Sirius XM radio, Dana Brown, saying, we're going to try and go big to see if there's a deal that makes sense for the organization. Said if that doesn't work, we'll go to the mid-level and we can land something there. I think there are going to be a lot more teams that have that same mindset in terms of, hey, this might be an open field this season. That's going to make the asking price really interesting for this trade deadline if you want starting pitching, because it seems like there's a lot of teams that are saying, let's go big, and if we can't go big, then we'll use some of those assets to go to the mid-level.
And I'll be curious because I think it is going to be a bidding war on some of those top names, like an Erik Fetty, who we've talked about, that Bob Nightingale reported over the weekend. Cardinals have strong interests in. I think you're going to see a lot of those guys, the rental arms, Kikuchi, Jack Flaherty, those guys are going to have markets. What I'm going to be curious to see is the bidding war coming from the AL side? Because in the NL, I haven't really heard, like, the Mets sound like a team that's going to stand pat. Arizona sounds like they want to add to their bullpen. Some of these teams want to add just little bits and pieces. I think the Cardinals, you add that mid-tier starter, you add, 2/3, I would call them, actually. Sounds better.
Yeah, mid-tier sounds like what they already have.
Yeah, add a elite right-handed reliever that can go in the back end of your pen and possibly a right-handed bat. Like, they're not going to be favored probably in most of the series that they go into, but it's finally the first time in which I think we'll see how it plays out. But I think it would be the first time in a while that when they go into the playoffs, I can look at the roster and say, okay, this is complete. There's not a major hole. When you think of the teams that made the playoffs in the most recent years, that 21 team, look, they were fun. Once you got past Adam Wainwright, it was like, who starts game 2? John Lester, Jay Happ, Wade LeBlanc. It was like, what are we doing? You look at that 22 team, it really fell off once you got past the 5-hole spot, and their bullpen was very thin. If they can add a right-handed reliever, they can add a starter, and they can potentially add a right-handed bat, I think you can now look at this team and say, they're not great, what you mentioned earlier in the show. They're not really great at anything. Maybe the bullpen's great, but there's not a lot of major holes that could potentially sink them in October.
I'll tell you what that does. If you do have a lot of teams bidding on those rental players, it does make the intriguing situation of the guys that kind of control their destiny in terms of Max Scherzer. Does Chris Bassett have trade? He's got a modified no trade. That creates a little bit more interest if you're going after guys that can somewhat control where they're going to get traded to, because a lot of those teams that are going all in might not be willing to do that for guys that have the trade protection on it. I don't know. That'll be the interesting part of kind of who these teams are going in all in on. But you're right. Because it's so wide open and because of the bidding war, it'll really come down to what some of these teams are deciding to do once you get closer to that trade deadline. And again, if you missed anything, conversation with Katie Woo, Erik Kratz, or anything from the show today, check it out up on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. For T-Bone and for BK, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll be back with you tomorrow from 11 to 2. Fast Lane from Centene Community Ice Center comes your way next here on 101 ESPN.